It is 7:02, Wednesday, March 11th, 2015. This is the Evanston Plan Commission. I am Jim Ford. We have a quorum, so I will call the meeting to order. You have the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to be made to the agenda? If none, the agenda will stand as it's been submitted. The first order of business will be the approval of the minutes of the meeting of February 11th, 2015. Are there any additions or changes, corrections to the minutes? I do have two corrections. We checked the record and determined that on 2 points we had taken roll call votes, and they are reported as voice votes. Those were on the Dempster, Maine Overlay District and on the first half of the fence regulations matter. Both of those were unanimous, so we will correct the minutes to reflect that. Let me say in general, my intent is that where a matter is wholly within us, appointments, approval of minutes, things like that, we'll do those by voice vote. Any matter that is going to City Council, we'll do by roll call. If there are no other corrections or changes to the minutes, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Goddard, second.
Second.
Lewis, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes stand approved. The next order of business is a public hearing on a petition for special use approval for a planned development at 1620 Central Street, case number 15 PLND 0011. Let me briefly summarize the procedure that will follow for the public hearing. Our purpose is to gather facts and information regarding the proposed development and to prepare a recommendation to the City Council. That recommendation may be for approval of the proposal, approval with conditions, or denial. The City Council in this matter is the final determining body. We make a recommendation, they make the decision. The procedure will be as follows. Staff will give us a summary of the proposal, identify any materials that have been received from the petitioner or others that are being entered into the record. They will identify the standards by which the proposal is to be assessed and present their recommendation. The petitioner will then present testimony and witnesses in support of the project. We're not going to establish a strict time limit on that presentation, but 20 minutes would be a nice target. Commissioners' questions by the commissioners will be permissible at any point during that presentation. I would encourage us, though, to wait until after the presentation is complete. I would remind commissioners that during this stage of the hearing, we will entertain questions for clarification, but not comments and discussion until we go to deliberation. At the completion of the petitioner's presentation, members of the public, and after commissioners have asked questions they have, members of the public may ask questions of the petitioner and the petitioner's witnesses. Members of the public will then be invited to present testimony. That testimony will be under oath. It will be in the order in which you have signed in. I assume there is a sign-in sheet for witnesses? Okay. If you have not signed in and expect to testify, you'll have an opportunity to do that before we get to you. Generally, again, we will not set a hard time limit. If you represent an organization, I would suggest that you try to hold comments to 10 minutes. If you're speaking as an individual, 5 would be a good target. I will retain the right to either limit the length of testimony if it goes way too long, or to disallow testimony which is either not relevant to the matter before us or which is repetitive. If someone else has said what you want to say, you can simply affirm what they've said. At the end of that, the petitioner may ask questions of the public members who testified. Presumably, the petitioner can ask questions of each public member as they testify. At the conclusion of questions, the petitioner may make a brief closing statement. Staff may then make brief closing comments. And at that point, we will close the public hearing record and proceed to deliberation. The commission may choose to continue this hearing to a future date if it's necessary to secure additional information. That will be to a date and time certain, and those will be announced before we conclude the proceedings tonight. If the meeting is continued, there will be no further public notice. We will not publish notice because there won't be a new meeting. Any person or group with an ownership or leasehold interest within 1,000 feet of the subject property may be granted one continuance for the purpose of presenting evidence to rebut testimony given by the petitioner. That request for that continuance must be in writing. It may be submitted any time after the petitioner has completed their testimony, but any time before we close the hearing. If a request for continuance is submitted as public testimony is being taken, we may continue to take public testimony to let anybody who wants to speak tonight, both to save time and out of respect for people who have come tonight expecting to speak. But the continuance will be granted, and the person who requests it will be first on the agenda when the continued hearing is reconvened. If you speak tonight and the meeting is continued, you may not speak at the continued meeting. You will be under oath tonight, and if you return to the continued meeting, you will still be under oath. I think that's all I have to say about the procedure. One thing I need to clarify concerns us. There are two sorts of people up here. Mr. Updike and Mr. Galloway are associate members of the commission. They are retired commissioners. They are entitled to participate in discussion and questioning, but do not vote. The rest of us here, except Mr. Latinovich, of course, will vote on the final determination. Before we proceed, I need to swear any of you who will speak. So if you expect to speak, or if you anticipate that you might be called upon to speak, please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth in this proceeding? Thank you. With that, what did I miss?
I think that's it.
Terrific. Then you're on. The staff will make its presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first case tonight in front of us is the request for special use approval for a planned development at 1620 Central Street. This slide shows the location of the site, outlined in yellow, the property zone 01 office, and it's also part of the Central Street Overlay District, which is outlined in black here. As you can see, the area to the north and areas to the east and west are also zone 01. There's R1 areas to the east also, and then to the south. B1 area is located to the northwest. This is a close-up aerial shot of the property. It's approximately 31,000 square feet in area. Let's see if we can get the lights down. So the property is approximately 31,000 square feet in area. It's currently improved with a two-story office building that's currently vacant. It also includes a surface parking lot in the rear. It's 36 parking spaces. To the east of the site, there are townhomes, 2.5-story townhomes, and then 4 single-family homes. And then to the west, there's also a townhouse community. And then to the south is this St. Athanasius, thank you, school, and the church further to the south. This is the proposal of the developer. This is a multifamily 4-story building outlined in white with green space surrounding the building, the access into the underground parking lot that I'll talk about that shortly, off of the alley. So the project characteristics, as I mentioned, the applicant is requesting a special use approval simply because of the size of the development. The area of the lot is over 30,000 square feet, so a plan development approval is required. It's also a multifamily development, and in the O1 district, a multifamily residential use is only allowed as a special use, including the dwelling units on the ground floor that are also required to have a special use. As I mentioned, property is approximately 32,000 square feet, zone O1 in the Central Street Overlay District. It's actually designated as sub-area 3 within the Overlay District. The proposed building size is 61,831 square feet. There are 47 dwelling units proposed, 11 of them one-bedroom units, 28 two-bedroom units, and 8 three-bedroom units. The applicant is proposing 54 parking spaces within an underground garage that's accessed off of the alley in the rear. The proposed height of the building is 45 feet, that's 4 stories. These are the major zoning requirements for the project, for the site, and how this proposed development complies with those. The proposed building is located 24 and a half feet from the curb of Central Street area. 14 feet is required. I'm not going to go through all these in the detail, but these indicate the elements of the plan that comply with the zoning requirements. The FAR is 1.93. That's within the 1.99 allowed. There's a bonus under the Central Street Overlay District that's for the underground parking, so the maximum, based on the number of parking spaces underground, is 1.99. The height, per the underlying zoning district, the maximum height is 52 feet and 5 stories, whichever is less. They're proposing 45. And then there's a requirement that I'll talk about a little bit later for to comply with the transitional plane height requirement along the east and the south property line, because those two property lines abut R1 residential district, and the development does comply with that requirement along the east lot line. These are the site development allowances. The developer is asking for 4 development allowances. One of those is for that transitional plane height requirement along the south property line, where at the 10-foot setback where they're proposing the building, the maximum height allowed is 35 feet, and they're proposing 45-foot building. So there's a diagram later on that I'll probably explain that a little bit better. But the number of parking spaces that is required based on the number of units and the number of bedrooms in those units is 72. The applicant is proposing 54. There's also a requirement in the Central Street Overlay District to have the 3rd and 4th floor of the building step back from the lower 2 levels. So per code, and based on the depth of this property, the 3rd and 4th floor would have to be stepped back 20 feet. That's approximately 34 feet from the curb. In this case, the applicant's proposal has a 3rd floor that's in line with the 2nd floor, so there's no setback, but it's 12.5 feet from the sidewalk and 24.5 from the curb. And then the 4th floor does have a slight step back from the 3rd floor, and that 4th floor is 17.5 feet from the sidewalk and then 29.5 from the curb. The other site development allowance that I did not mention is the landscape screening for the loading dock in the back. It is required. The proposed loading dock is parallel to the alley, and the applicant is not proposing any landscape screening. This again is the site layout of ground floor of the building. This indicates the unit count on the ground floor. The main entrance is off of Central Street. There's a ADA accessible ramp, and the lobby. This is actually the 2nd floor plan. I apologize for that. But the lobby is in the center of the building. And then, as I mentioned, the alley in the back with the access to the underground parking garage. There's a trash enclosure next to that, and then the loading dock is located right here. This is the underground parking garage. As you can see, the indication here is the clockwise one-way direction within the parking deck. The underground northwest corner of the underground parking garage does include storage for bike facilities. This would be the 2nd and 3rd floor again. They're exactly the same And the fourth floor indicated here includes the step back from the Central Street, and then a slight step back, I think of only about a foot or 2 feet from the east lot line, and then on the west side of the building. On the south side of the building, there's no step back, and similar on this portion of the building. These are the elevations of the building. I believe the applicant will be talking about this in further detail, so I don't want to go into a lot of detail on this, but this is the front elevation along Central Street. It indicates the types of materials to be used. Aluminum siding on the fourth floor, brick siding on the lower 3 levels with some aluminum paneling between the windows. This particular tree in the front is an existing elm tree that the applicant will be saving. It's one of the public benefits. The same thing is the case with the tree in the rear. It's another elm tree that's actually even larger, I believe, 42-inch caliper, and that tree is proposed to remain. So this is the rear elevation along the alley. Here's the ramp down to the parking garage, and there's also an access staircase. As you can see on the east side of the building, 2.5-story townhomes on both sides, I should say. And then there's, off of the alley, there's a one-car garage for one of the single-family homes. These are the east and west elevations of the building. This is the east elevation that indicates additional screening on that side, and then on the west side on the lower level. You can also see the proposed step back of the fourth floor. That's about 5 feet from the third floor and below. And then the first floor is actually raised about 3 feet above ground, and then there will be a berm that lead sort of for screening of that portion of the building. This slide was submitted to indicate how this proposed building reflects on the existing building on the site that's outlined in the red, and obviously the outline of the proposed building in white. This is also another shot of the comparison between the two existing buildings on the property. As you can see, the existing building is approximately 43 feet in height, and the proposed building, the roof line of that building is 45 feet as measured to the top of the flat roof, and then the parapet wall extends above that to about 47.5 feet. This is a cross-section on Central Street. The street is approximately here with parking on both sides. This is a section of the building that maybe even better indicates the step back on the fourth floor, the elm tree in the parkway, and then Ryan Field further down the street. This is the surface parking lot that belongs to Northwestern University. These are the diagrams that I mentioned earlier that indicate how this proposal complies or does not comply with the required transitional plane height requirement. This is for the Central Street Overlay District. So when an office or commercial district is adjacent to a R1 residential district, the maximum height allowed along that property line, and in this case, this would be along the east property line, the maximum height is measured at a 10-foot setback. It's allowed to be 35 feet, which matches the maximum height of the single-family homes. And then at a 45-foot angle, that the height is determined up to the maximum height allowed within this district, and in this case, that's 52 feet. So this red line indicates the envelope where the building could be designed, and it sort of indicates the setback of this building towards the east property line. And then along the south property line, where they're asking one of the site development allowances, the same thing, 10-foot setback, then the height is allowed to be 35 feet, and then you have to go at an angle of 45 degrees. And clearly their building kind of encroaches over that line, and that's where the height of the building is 45 feet. As I mentioned in previous projects, all planned developments are required to provide public benefits. These are outlined in your staff report, and these are usually finalized as the project moves on between the Planning Commission and the Planning and Development Committee of the City Council. In this case, this proposed project, these are the public benefits. They're proposing to bury the overhead utility lines along the alley. They will be preserving, as I mentioned, the elm trees in the southeast corner and the one in the parkway. One thing that I forgot to mention, but I'm sure the applicant will be talking about that, they have proposed to grant the 10-foot easement to the single-family home property owners along the east property line. That is proposed to remain as turf, and the intent of that is to, in the future, be used for, as a driveway to access the rears of those lots and possibly construct garages on those lots. They're also proposing to provide one Divvy bike share membership for every unit, and then free CTA passes for every unit in the building. This goes along with supporting the transit-oriented development concept of the project. They will be doing streetscape improvements along Central Street. One of the other things in the overlay district is that there's a requirement to make the sidewalk be expanded to 8 feet, so a 6-foot parkway and then an 8-foot public sidewalk. Right now it's about 5 feet, so they're going to be improving that. They're going to add also 5 bike racks as bike parking facilities for the public. They have agreed to replace the existing wood fence along the west property line, which belongs to the Townhome Association adjacent to the west. They've also agreed to install 2 free on-site electric vehicle charging stations within the underground parking garage. And they've also committed to arranging for 2 new car share spaces along Central Street that would be of a benefit for the rest of the neighborhood. They will be installing a green roof on the portion of the underground parking garage and also have the building certified as minimum LEED silver. Now, as you're probably aware, every planned development does have to satisfy standards for special use and then standards outlined for public benefit for planned developments and also standards outlined within the O1 district. These standards are for the special use. Staff has evaluated the standards based on the application and the documents that have been submitted to us that are indicated in the packet and that were provided on the website. Based on our evaluation, and that evaluation is not based on any testimony that will be taken tonight, we feel that the standards have been satisfied. In this case, the special use standards, there's 9 of them. We believe that they have been satisfied except for the 2 which we believe are not applicable. We also believe that standards that are applicable for the planned developments in general and those in the O1 district, and that's outlined in the section 6369 and then 61519. We do believe that those standards have been satisfied. And the detailed analysis of that is in the staff report, so I don't want to go over that. We also believe that the project is consistent with the Central Street Master Plan and the Comprehensive General Plan of the city, as well as with the design guidelines for the planned developments. This project was presented to the Design and Project Review of the city in February and received a unanimous approval. And then finally, in our staff report, based on the elements of the project that we've seen, the submittals that we've seen so far, staff does recommend approval, and we have included conditions in there in case the Plan Commission finds that all the standards have been satisfied. Staff recommends that these conditions be included in there. And I'll just go quickly over them. These are pretty general. The first one is the general standard that we use for all plan developments, that the plans that ultimately get constructed and submitted for permit do have to be consistent with what's being presented in the plan development application and tonight in front of the Plan Commission. We have suggested that no exterior lighting be installed on the east side, except for that needs to meet the fire and life safety code requirements, both on the east and west sides of the building because of the residential nature of the properties on those 2 sides. The traffic circulation within the underground parking garage, we are recommending that be one way for safety purposes, and we do have suggested that a mirror be installed on the bottom and then on the top, and I believe the applicant is aware of these conditions and they have agreed that they would do this. As just a note that there will be some discussion about on-street parking and the proposed number of parking spaces in the building. I just want to clarify, and this is in the ordinance as a condition, that the building residents of this building will not be eligible for residential on-street parking permits. A number of these streets surrounding the area are permitted, and people that live within those blocks can get those permits. The residents of this building will not be eligible for those. And then they will have to agree to a construction management plan, again, a standard condition that we come to an agreement with the developer or the applicant before the permit is issued for proper construction methods and timely construction of the building. And finally, the last one, which is also a standard one, that any changes to the use from what's being approved will have to come back from the Plan Commission and the City Council as an amendment. With that, I would open the floor to any questions.
If not, then Mr. Majewski, you want to make your presentation?
Thank you very much. I think we're just going to pull it up. Again, my name is John Majewski. I'm with Majewski Architects. We're located at 630 Davis Street in the historic Chandler Building right here in Evanston. I will be making probably the majority of the presentation tonight unless there are specific questions. I did want to make sure that everybody know that Jarvie Wooster with Real Capital Solutions is right here. He is actually the developer, along with the developer partner of Tom McHugh with McHugh Construction, who is also here. And then we have the experts that might be needed if anything comes up. We have a representative from Gwalt Hamilton for civil. Oh, it's like, sure. Actually, I'll let you do it. Just have a seat, then you'll make sure you can keep up. We have representatives from Tesca, another Evanston-based firm helping us with all of our landscaping, and KLOA is here to advise on the traffic side. And I did want to introduce the project manager from our office, Josh Sachs, who's also an Evanston resident and is here as well. With that, I think what I can do is maybe walk you through the presentation. I'll try to be brief. Demir did a great job, so there's going to be a few of these things that overlap. But I think there'll be some other points that we will try to make. I do want to start off by saying that we started on this project about a year ago. And it's the first time that we've actually come in front of anybody from a public perspective, except for the exception of Dapper, which really handled the appearance portion just a few weeks back. The project, and you can start if you want to hit the first one. The project team, I've really just covered Real Capital Solutions. They're based near Boulder, Colorado. McHugh is based here in Chicago. Obviously, we're here in Evanston. And Tesca is also here in Evanston. And then we walked you through some of the other folks. Project site, why don't we just go through? I think what's really important to emphasize is how important this project is as a transit-oriented project. And we really are trying to make a point of that by everything we're trying to do to make this project better. And in doing that, I think we have to all recognize it's a phenomenal site when it comes to transportation. First, we're located by two of the very most primary transportation things, with the L being to our east and with Metra being to our west. Both of them are within walking distance. And then the real driver for this project is the location as far as its relationship to the hospital, to the Northwestern campus, even though we're located near the athletic campus. One of the real strong benefits that does come up is the parking lot that's across the street does have a direct shuttle that leads to Northwestern as well. And then just the fact that generally where we're located with bus service and other activities and the whole transit-oriented neighborhood that exists along Central Street is critical to why this project made sense for the development team and why they strive to do a project in this location. This blows it up a little bit quicker. We also want to point out that there will be divvy stations at both the Central Street station and the Metra station. It's important to note we have made a commitment to the divvy program, and we think it's exciting. We've made a commitment to bike transportation in general, as well as all the other transportation that's available. I think everybody understands the key points that are around the site. Central Street is just to our north. If there's anybody who needs any clarification on any of the particulars, this tries to break up what is exactly around our site, but we'll get into detail, I think, in some of the next images as well. The location is a very unique portion of Central Street. It's not the same as Central Street, perhaps west of the Metra station or Central Street station. It's its own neighborhood in many ways, because our portion of the site transforms very quickly once you get past the Central Street project, which is on the right, which is the 4 levels of residential above the new commercial space. And that was a project that obviously had been approved several years ago and is located across the whole front of that. It does have a retail component. As soon as you get immediately, and that's on the far right of the image, as soon as you get immediately to the left, you really make a transition to, for the most part, an all residential neighborhood, with the exception of immediately across the street. We get some limited retail services, things that are on the lower level of that building that's marked 4 levels. And then you move to the 2 buildings on either side of our project. One is the townhouses marked 3 levels. To the right of our project, then there's the existing building, then there are 2 townhouse projects that immediately fill in until you get to Ashland. The townhouse projects are very unique in that they're oriented primarily with their views to the east and the west. There is no orientation fundamentally towards the street because they are just basically blank walls that abut the street. It is interesting that all of those properties do actually literally abut the street. They are right up against the property line, and do not actually follow through with some of the desires of the Central Street plan as it's been envisioned. But I think that makes sense given that this is a different type of neighborhood. It was pretty critical in our beginning discussions, and we've had 24 meetings with neighbors. We had our first public meeting, and that was back in June of last year. And since then, we've had 23 other meetings with neighbors. We have been meeting with neighbors in individual basis. We've met with groups of neighbors. Fundamentally, we've tried to work. We've been accused of dividing and conquering, but that has not been our intention. It's very hard to meet with 20 or 30 people and to get any true answers. So we've tried to work with each association separately. So we met with the townhouse group that's immediately to the west. We met to their representatives very early in the project, actually before our community meeting. Then we also met with the townhouse representatives to the left. Usually it was a president or a past president. Then we did have a meeting with Northwestern as well, and we had a meeting with the church immediately to the south of our property, and then also the 4 homeowners that are located adjacent to the east side of our property. In the last few weeks, we've met with some of the neighbors that are across the street on Ashland as well and tried to address some of their concerns. Everybody has had an impact on the project in a big way, actually. Maybe not as big as what everybody would like to have, but we've tried to really work hard. I don't think this is unique for our approach. I hope it's unique for a project here in Evanston that somebody would go through this effort, and we hope it's all for a good purpose, but we really believe that most of the problems should be worked out before they come here, and that this isn't the forum to find out what the issues are. I do think some of the issues that will come up, perhaps, are things that we need your help on helping us to get moving in the right direction. We think we've done that today, and we think our presentation tries to envelop all of the concerns that we felt we could address, and we're going to walk you through that very quickly. This is really just to show the existing building, the amount of paving, and that there were 36 existing parking spaces. Here's the front of the existing building, back of the existing building, some of the street on either side and some of the streetscape that's there. There's a lot of landscaping immediately to the west of the property. So we did try to work. It's all mainly on the owners to the west side of our property. It does limit the amount of landscaping we can get into the west because there's such a huge overgrowth. This is actually showing you a few of the images around the site and the primary elm trees that we were trying to keep, the one in the front and the one in the back. They both have been checked by the city's arborist, and they are very lucky specimens that seem to be doing a very, very good job, and so we wanted to preserve them and do whatever we can to do that, and that will include treating them, pruning them, doing root pruning before construction, and we will give our best effort to really make sure that those trees survive. Project design really developed ultimately out of our discussions. As I had mentioned, these were the key groups that we met with. It was a very productive group of meetings as we went along, and I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the changes that came out of that. First meeting was June 26th. The last meeting was March 7th. Before the June 26th meeting, we had several meetings with city staff, the alderman, just to present the project. The alderman was very clear that we wanted to have a neighborhood meeting as the very first thing that we do. That was really a well-attended meeting. We did get several comments, but I think we learned most of the concerns in smaller group meetings that would happen after that. We really wanted to make sure that everybody understands that we really do appreciate the existing neighborhood uses and that we really are trying to embrace a transit-oriented site as opposed to just saying that we're going to park a lot of cars on the site. I know it seems counterintuitive sometimes to say that just adding 2 parking spaces per unit isn't the best solution, but it's really been proven that if you're trying to develop a community into a transit-oriented community, the best solution is not to introduce more vehicles, but to actually find solutions that work with the transportation that you have. That can't always be the case, but I really think it would be hard to find a better site than this particular site when it comes to that, given some of the small subtleties of even the transportation that leads right from the parking lot across the street to something like the campus at Northwestern. Obviously, sustainability is a big part of our project. It's an important goal for us. LEED Silver is the minimum that we will achieve and will be part of our development as well. The site plan, this was our first community meeting. There were actually about 4 or 5 meetings before this, and to be honest with you, what came out of those first meetings were we wanted to balance the bulk of the mass between the single-family homes and the townhouses to the west. That wasn't necessarily a perfect solution, but that's where we started. We were pushing the building back because of the tree on Central Street. We were trying to push it. Before that, we didn't know that the tree at the alley was actually going to be one that was worth keeping, but we did find out that it was. So after we went through this first series of meetings, this was kind of what maybe happened after 4 meetings and what was actually presented at that June 26th meeting. Then the next steps, I'll just kind of walk you through. We met with a townhouse group that's located to the upper right-hand corner. There was a request to push certain portions of the building back, so we reconfigured that corner first. The next step was that we met with the single-family homeowners, and they really encouraged us to push the building back on their side. Next step, there was a request from the church to remove the parking because of, and some neighbors actually had brought this up. They were concerned about the parking spaces backing up in and out of the development. So we could have provided more parking, and we still probably could, but we were really trying to respond to what the neighbors were asking for, and that was some of the Ashland residents who just know the alley movement and really what the church had asked us to from their school perspective. So we eliminated the parking along the alley. Then there was a request to try to, if we could stretch the building out further. It's one of the reasons why the mass pushed further to the south. It won't block the light to anybody that is south of the alley, and we'll show you some sun studies to show the minimal impact that it will have by doing that. But that was able to lop the corner off on the other side, on the west side of the project. That was a request from one of the townhouses at the back to open that space up. Next. Then there was a request from somebody on the west side as well to locate the ramp further away. The ramp is in this location. It actually started over behind the residential neighbors. It didn't make sense to have the ramp there because of the flow of the church's Sunday school, school program. So the best location was the one that we have and where we've located it now. It seems to neck in very well with the way the traffic flows. It's not perfect. I don't think it ever can be perfect. And there was no desire to have the ramp located off of Central Street. That just seemed very disruptive to both Central Street, and it was pretty clear that the city did not want us to do that as well. And then the idea of pulling the loading dock out of the back of the area of the single-family homes and making it parallel was a practical one, again, because of the circulation that goes through the alley, and that having vehicles back in and out, larger vehicles, was something we were asked not to do. So that was the reason why we actually put the loading dock parallel, and it's adjacent to our rear door. We would love to landscape it. I don't think we could spend much more money than we on. Place to put landscaping when it's parallel. That's because there's the way to access the building on the right side, and then there's a screened trash enclosure on the left side. So it's very screened from the left side, but fundamentally, it's not intended to be, I think, the type of loading facility. Excessive screening. It isn't, a loading trash type of facility. It's simply people moving in and out on a very scheduled and irregular basis, because this is not student housing. This is market rate housing, so people will move in and out on a constant flow. Yes, there will be a little bit more movement at the beginning when it first opens up, but then it should generate itself into something a little bit more reasonable. Then we were asked to grant a 10-foot easement to the homeowners adjacent on the other portion because they couldn't get to their property. The one to the south actually can get off of the alley, but the other 3 did not have access. And we did work with them and had come to an agreement to provide an access point so that they would be able to get into the back of their property. That really led us to where Demir showed you. It was important when you look at the building, some of the things that were existing on the site, but immediately to the west at the rear of the property, we tried to make a very large landscaped terrace area. It is lifted up 3 feet. Because of the fence location and the location of the living areas of the townhouses to the west, they actually will probably be one of the primary beneficial views to see this area. But I will point out they have a very heavy canopy of trees along their side. There was concern about their fence being damaged, so we did agree to replace that. Then there'll be blow-ups on the right side, but you can see we get up to about 32.5 feet of total distance from the backyard of the single-family homes to our building. There's a very wide swath of landscaping there. One of the earlier problems we have is by granting the easement, we actually couldn't put landscaping in the easement because it's intended to be an access point. So we have to limit the amount of landscaping. So we push that more closer to the building. And then we've tried to landscape the front, which will blow up here next. And then really try to work by pushing the building in from where that red dotted old building is, because that was very easy to show residents how things would get better. Yes, there's a bigger building, no question about it, but that it would get better as far as particular views would go. You can see that where we go from a 5-foot setback on the west side to 10 feet. If you look on the east side, it goes all the way up to almost 19-foot 10 from where the existing building is, which gives us well over 20 feet of setback for those residents, and obviously much greater when you get to the single-family residents. There was some concern about our entry being not so close to the townhouses, so we pulled that away and created a little landscape nook in that front portion. This one you already saw, so you get an idea of the overview of scale. This is just a comparison. Before, it was about 9,800 square feet, 9,900 square feet of landscape with the existing site. Currently, we'll be at about 10,900, so we'll include or improve the landscaping by about 1,000 square feet, and that excludes the alley, the 10-foot easement. If that were to be landscaped, obviously that would add substantial more. I think it's important to understand, I think Demir did a good job, so I don't want to beat these to death, but we are here tonight primarily because we have no option. This is required to get a special use. We are required to go through the PUD process or the PD process here because we're over 30,000 square feet. A text amendment came before you earlier. It's one of the reasons the project has been delayed for, probably 3 or 4 months easily, was to get the text amendment to allow us along Central Street to actually do a project because we're required to do a PD. We can't build anything by right. We can't just follow the existing zoning, and that's because we're over 30,000 square feet. So no matter what we would do with whatever development, it would come in front of you as a PD. Once it's a PD, we understand that there is a certain sense of what you'd want to try to do to give some public benefits back. Demir did a good job. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through it. We were very careful to stay under the maximum FAR of 1.99, and we're well below the number of units because the current maximum dwelling units is 67 units, and we're at 47. And the maximum height is obviously below the required height, 1 story less and well less than the 52-foot height. We are asking for relief on the parking with the 72-space parking requirement, providing 54 spaces. And then we have an extra bike space, and bike parking is not an issue for us because we have 10 on Central Street, and we have many corners that we can probably squeeze additional parking in. We're also going to provide parking within the residential units where people can hang their bikes. It's important to note that because some of these bikes are extremely expensive now. They can be $5,000, $10,000, and people just don't feel comfortable keeping them even in a locked room in today's day and age. Next. Parking, I think I just wanted to let you know that there are 54 spaces. It comes to 1.15. That gives us, we're planning on 4 guest spaces. They can access the parking by dialing in when they pull up from the rear, calling the guest. The guest can buzz them in, or they can enter a code if they get it from the guest in a prior time. 4 of those spaces will be dedicated within the building. We've made arrangements for parking during construction to use the northwestern lot across the street so that everybody can be parking over there during construction. And obviously, we've run through the fact that Metra is 2 blocks away, the CTA is 5 blocks away, Divvy bike sharing at both ends of those spectrums. We're providing the Divvy bike share program for 3 years. These are some substantial costs. That's about an $11,000, $12,000 expense. Providing CTA buses to all the residents for the first year is about $56,000. But it's just showing our commitment towards transportation and to encouraging people that are going to move into this building to understand that public transportation is a huge benefit. And if we get the right people in, that's the whole way the plan is desired to go. So if somebody wanted to come in with 2 cars, they're not going to be able to lease in this building. It's just not the way it's set up to work. That's the model that the development group works with. That's the management model they work with. Those will be the clients that will actually rent within the building. Bike racks along Central are also part of the Central development. Obviously, we have a CTA link, and then the shuttle bus I mentioned. These just show you where the bike storage is and where the electric charging stations are inside the building, traffic flow. This walks you through, you get a better sense of kind of the bike storage up in front. Blowing up that front area, what we tried to do with the parkway by widening it, adding that furniture zone, the 8-foot sidewalk, which will add a wider sidewalk than anywhere else, but for now that gets the plan done to the appropriate standards in front of our project so future projects can fill in after that. The landscaping, Tesca could walk through if there are specific questions. It's really gorgeous landscaping, and the plan that we've done above in some of these rooftop decks, berming some of the soil over the side, adding some very substantial trees along the east side primarily, lower growth along the west side, and then really reinforcing the Central Street side along the front as well. This kind of walks you through some of the concepts. Public benefits are really, I think I'd probably love to go through them again, but you've been very patient, so I'm not going to, because Demir really did hit all of them right on target. Some of these are extremely expensive. One of them is just burying the utilities. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars at this particular location, but that clearly does add a big benefit. It's a very long-term goal. It's happened on projects so far. It'll build up over time, and eventually maybe many of these streets won't have overhead poles. Next. The exterior design, I think we want to be able to walk you through. Next. What we really wanted to do here was find a way to break up the building mass to really create and have it read in different planes. We wanted to divide up the bigger, larger portions of the mass of the building and create smaller portions. We worked hard on the building scale and context. The neighborhood is a very unique context. It isn't like, it's not as consistent as one might think. I suppose the most consistent elements we have are just those on either side of us. As you go from massive projects across the street like the stadium, which you can say has nothing to do with it, but it literally is there, so you know it's there, to very small one-story projects, Mustard's Last Stand. It's very eclectic. This side of the street's a little bit more consistent. We feel that the use of the materials are very appropriate for the massing and the scale and how we try to break it up. It's primarily, and I'll go into that in a little bit of detail, we get into it in a little bit more once we get into some details. The materials are really of the highest quality, and when we say we have aluminum siding, I want to make sure everybody understands that's extruded aluminum panel siding. So it's longboard, which are the click-in extruded metal pieces. There's nothing about the materials that we're using that are inexpensive. There's no Drive-It, there's no Hardy board. These are all really wonderful materials. Balconies are an integral part of our design. We have been asked to make some modifications to those, which we have, and those will show up. Orienting the primary entrance to the street was obviously very important for this project, and I think what that and the residents do is help really promote this idea of surveillance on the street and really keeping eyes on the street. Here you see it from Central Street, standing across the street. You can see the entry element on the left side. We're going to show you in a little bit of detail here. We tried to break the front of the building up into 3 masses. Yes, they tend to be more vertical, but instead of doing a long horizontal one, what we tried to do is have relief at the back of the building, create individual 3-story elements that break up the different levels, and then have the recessed balcony areas break up those elements even further. Part of the building jogs as it goes back. The rear of the building, here you're standing across in St. A's parking lot looking back, seeing the ramp going down. And part of that garden area, we are showing the trees here at what we believe to be, I think it's like a 10 to 12-year growth pattern. We'll show you some elevations to see how they were planted initially. Most of the big trees you see are all existing trees on either side of the property and are actually the real existing trees. This is a view as you look along Central Street heading towards the east. Then we walk you
Mr.
through.
Majewski, I hate to do this.
Yeah.
Maybe if you could focus on those aspects of the project that we have not seen,
Okay. Well, keep
and
going.
anything that was not included in the materials that we received.
Perfect. Next.
We're at almost a half an hour now.
Okay. This, I just wanted to show you how we broke that front part up because it's integral to what I just walked you through. The upper portion you can see with the blue line is set back further. The red part is the part that's out in front. The white part with the red below it shows you the facade and the breakup. Next. You've seen this. This shows you the elevations, which Demir's already walked you around. These are the materials that are being used. Just want to let you know, again, as I've said, it's an aluminum cladding material, a modular brick, not a large brick, a standard brick, some of the different colors of the materials. And then again, this street section, which was already shown. And then this walks us through the back of the project. This is kind of a good one to get a sense to see the space and what had happened from that setback plane. I won't take you through the shadow studies, although maybe some of the residents would like to see them because they take time to play. We actually did the shadow studies if you'd like to see them as a video. These are the hard line versions of them. Next. Take you through both the December, the two different times of the year, and the summer. This is the building cut in behind the large trees. We're not playing any games. That's really the way it would appear from Google. That's not life generally exactly, but that's how we tried to place it. And then I think the next ones are important because these were requested from the neighbors. This is a view standing on Ashland, looking at the mass of the building, so you get a sense behind the homes, you see what the project looks like. It's not really evident. Yes, this is at 10 or about 9 feet on top of a Google truck van taking this picture. It's not the view from the attic across the street, but it's a reasonable view. This well shows you the building demarcated in the background as well. This shows you the views from everybody's backyard. Here's the existing building. Next picture will show you the building put in. We leave the existing building so you can see what was there, get a sense for perspective. There's the existing tree. Now we add the growth on it. This is what you get a rough idea of what the growth would be for the existing project. This is one of the next houses. Here you see it before. Here we add in the landscaping and the building in the background. Here we add in the green that goes with it, with what's there. Here's the other last house on the alley. It actually has a garage. Add in the building, locating, adding in the green for the trees that are there, and there's the project. This just shows we were requested by the neighbors to show the existing, or the planting as it would first go in at its installation heights, and then the next image shows you at a mature height. So that really takes us through everything that we've done on the presentation. We did have a meeting over the last couple of days with the 4 single-family homeowners, and if you'd be kind enough to pull that up, then we can just show you very quickly the changes they asked us to make. I will submit those to you. And the idea was we worked with them to find, there's no perfect solution, again, but we worked with them to find a solution for some of their main concerns. And one of them was they asked if we could increase the width of that 10-foot easement. And this happened just literally today, where we finalized this in an agreement, which you have, where we agreed to do a 10-foot easement. We didn't want to add more paving, so we've agreed to keep the 10-foot paving that you see on the right side, but fit that into a 15-foot easement. They felt like that would give them more room to maneuver in and out of a potential loading area, or if they wanted a parking pad, or if they simply want to put a garage at the back of their property. To do that, we said we would work with moving any of our landscaping back and forth. If they could identify what they want to do, we have no problem putting that landscaping on the back of their property or putting in that little green strip that separates it. The only thing we asked is if they were going to build a garage, we didn't want to put landscaping in front of where the garage would go. So we would work with them to do that, and we're very, very excited that we've been able to come to this agreement. The easement that you have would be redefined. You already have the 10-foot easement in your package. It would simply be redefined to show this. We've also agreed to pay for the driveway and pay for the paving of the driveway, and that we would do that For the first probably 30 or 40 feet in a paving material that will be respectful for the tree. And then beyond that, we've actually agreed to do the 10-foot driveway out of concrete, and so that they won't have something that they're going to have to really worry about from a maintenance perspective for a long period of time. We also did agree to work with them on the actual facade slightly. So the real change here is that I think, look, everybody wanted us to cut off levels of our building. There's no question of that. So I just want to make sure that I'm not trying to misrepresent everything. We really had to work with the fixed volume we've had. We've cut back on it. We've made changes to it. We've pushed and pulled it. We're kind of at the point where, with all the things that we're trying to do, we have to find a reasonable expectation on the development. And to do that, we're trying to work with the envelope that we have. So this is where we showed it was 33'6" setback for the main portion of the building with a 2-foot setback at the 2'6" setback at the top. They encouraged us to push it back to 5 feet. We asked if we could pull the lower floors out a foot to do that. So the next image shows you that. We pushed out the bottom 3 floors a foot, pushed the top part back 1'6". That gives you a 5-foot setback at the top of the building. That's a net decrease of just 250 square feet, but the amount we'll request will go down by 250 square feet. And this just shows you that volume setback within the code-defined setback. We're well beyond that, and we're still able to work and I think find something that was reasonably okay for the neighbors. And we're very glad that we were able to come to an agreement with them, and we're very respectful of their requests and what they asked us to do. These also just show you that we agreed to articulate the facade. Instead of having it be all similar materials, we reduced the number and size of the windows at the top of the building. And then they asked us if it would be possible to change the brick material on these 2 portions of the building so that on this side of the building, it didn't all look consistently the same. And so we felt that that was a very reasonable request. We'll use a subtle brick material to do that. We're more than happy to go back to Dapper for any of these materials to re-review them. The project has to go back to them ultimately anyways, as Demir had mentioned. This shows you the other request was they didn't like the open balconies. We understood that, so we're proposing to do a perforated metal balcony, which will screen anything that would be behind it, still allows some air movement. And then we also agreed to make the balconies flush. By having the balconies flush between the massing, it doesn't really allow for a side to those balconies. We had done that initially because we thought the articulation helped, but we really respect that the neighbors felt like this gave them a little bit more privacy, and so this is really where we've ended up. So I'm sorry to take too much time. We've just really had a lot to cover, and I hope I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Majewski? I assume that we can include in this questions for any of your experts, although
Absolutely.
they will not speak unless asked.
Absolutely.
Got it. Okay, questions? I'm looking this way, I'm seeing nothing. I'm looking this way, I'm seeing Rich Schuer and Carol Goddard. Go, Rich.
Did you do any traffic analysis?
Yes, we did.
Is that in here? I don't think I saw it.
It is in there.
I'm sorry.
And if
then.
you, no, it's no problem. If you'd like me to have.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
And also, how many elevators are there in the building?
There's 1 elevator in the building.
Just one?
I'm sorry, there's 2 elevators.
There's two,
I'm sorry,
okay.
there's 2. The traffic analysis was actually done, I did want to clarify that, because I think some neighbors had questioned that. It was done the second day that St. A's started school, and so we did have a chance to talk to them. We've met with the church two times, and I know the traffic folks have met with them. That day was selected because it was going to be as busy as we anticipated and pretty much on a normal stream, if not slightly lifted up, because that first day is a pretty active day. We went with the second day of school starting. Northwestern was not in session. That has been a concern for some of the other neighbors, but we have clarified that we just don't see the Northwestern students adding traffic flow to the general concept of what we're proposing.
Do the parents of St. A's children use that alley to get to
Yeah.
and from?
That's the
Okay.
main drop-off point, so they're going in and out of that alley. It is, by the way, you have to go see it. It's the nicest alley in all of Evanston. It's, for some reason, it's just gorgeous. It's beautiful. Well paved, well taken care of. And that, where they drop off and the way the traffic flow occurs is part of why we determined where the drop-off would go and the ramp going down.
Okay, is that a one-way alley?
No, it's two-way. We have, the neighbors on Ashland really asked us if we could have our traffic vehicles exit and go to the right only. We've agreed to do that and to have traffic come in from that side. But there's not a perfect alley solution. I've met with everybody on that alley, and there's not uniformity in the way traffic flow should go. I don't know what the best solution is.
All right. I was just kind of curious. You're providing CTA passes, but yet CTA is really a little further than the metro station. Are you giving them an option, or is?
I think that's definitely a very reasonable thing. If that's something that Demir and we can talk about, I cannot imagine why there'd be any problem with that.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, what's your water table there underneath your parking lot?
The water table, when from the soil testing that we have, I think put it down, was around 13 or 14 feet. Yeah.
Was it that deep?
Yeah, it was. Which, you know, in other projects here in Evanston, we've seen it at 10, 12, and actually lower.
Okay. And this is for you, Demir. Do we have a dedicated bike lane on Central?
Not right now.
Is this in the plans? If we're going to encourage.
If I remember
Bicycle use?
correctly, there have been discussions to maybe have a shared lane. Central Street is relatively narrow with on-street parking on both sides, so I'm not sure what the ultimate result is going to be, but there will be some public hearings that I believe our Public Works section will be doing to determine what's the best solution to have an east-west corridor either on Central Street or on one of the side streets or something.
Yeah.
Other questions for Mr. Majewski? Yeah, Pagosi.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, John, I was just wondering on the pavilions when you changed the color of the brick and alternated it. I noticed that on this scheme you kept those elements all masonry. Did you consider keeping on the darker colored brick, making that all masonry instead of putting a Luca bond in there?
No, we didn't. We'd be very open to doing that.
Okay.
That would not be a concern on our part.
Um,
So the lighter color masses are all brick, and it's kind of hard to see, but the second element in the center, we could just keep consistently one brick and then just have that all be faced with brick.
Yeah, I personally think that would be better, but I'm not convinced that introducing a second color brick is the right thing to do, but that's, beyond this. I do think having the balconies being more more opaque is better. I would push back on that, the balcony being a bit proud of the masonry, because I think it does achieve the strategy of breaking that mass down. And other than that, I was just curious on the.
Okay. And I think the balconies are, we'll continue to work with the neighbors even after this is done. There'll be many issues from landscaping on. The townhouse group that is to the east and to the front, we have agreed to work with them to landscape their portion of the property, so it's integral with ours. That's something we've yet to actually confirm if they'd like us to do or not, but we're willing to do that as well.
If there are no further questions from the commission, are there questions for Mr. Majewski from members of the public? Come on up and to the podium and state your name and ask your question. Now, let me remind you, we are taking questions for the petitioner only at this point. When questions are finished, then we will invite you to make whatever statements you wish to make.
Jackie Black, 1626B Central Street. There were some things that were not covered that I'd like to ask questions about. Is the building going to be pet friendly? And if so, is there going to be a limit on the number of pets in the building? Oh, okay. You talked about lighting on the, the west side of the building. You didn't talk about windows. I think when I met with you, I shared with you that our balconies come out quite far, and they're also, our living spaces, our bedrooms and our living room. I'm not clear from any of this quite what's on that side. except that I do love the landscaping over the garage. On the animal side, again, we have some concerns, we neighbours. That building has become infested with all kinds of critters. I don't know how you deal with that, but I hope there is a plan to deal with it because it's been vacant for so very long. Okay. As far as I can remember, it was... Yeah, those were the bulk of the questions, so thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Majewski, do you want to respond to any or all?
I think I can try to address them. And Jarvi, I think one of the key questions will be whether the building itself will be pet friendly, and that has not been something that's been taken into consideration yet. So it's certainly something that we can look at. It would obviously be a part of the lease that they would put in. But right now, I think the expectation would be that it would probably be small pets, but that's something that we can really look into and get more detail on. As far as the west side and the view from your property and being able to discuss that closer, we can do that. We did have that opportunity to do that with the residents on the other side of the property. We'd be more than happy to do that with you as well. Okay, we've met with you. I've met with you several times. So whatever else we can do, if it's to show you a view from your home like we did for the residents, we'd be more than happy to do that. As you can see, there is no lighting. We've agreed with every neighbor, I believe, on either side, and Demir pointed out, we've agreed not to put any lighting except code-related lighting on any of the balconies. So right now, there is no lighting on either side. The only lighting that we anticipate having is going to be along the drop-off point near the loading dock area, and then as you go down the ramp, there are lights that are located in the side of the ramp to light you as you go down. At the base of the ramp, there's ceiling light, obviously, within the garage. And there's very minimal lighting at the front, enough to be reasonable, but the street lighting and, quite frankly, the alley lighting is part of the existing portion of the property that we would really be able to maintain as well. So we were asked not to add a lot of extra lighting on the sides, and we agreed not to do it.
Yes, sir.
Oh, and then as far as the critters go, we can talk to the current landowner about that. So we definitely, the owner does not own the property as in under contract right now. So we'll work with the existing landowner to solve that.
Thank you, Chairman Ford. My name is Jim Hughes.
Of course.
My first question is Certainly I can. Thank you. Sorry. The agenda, I believe, mentioned there might be additional site development allowances as needed. I would like to address to the developer, are there any additional site development allowances anticipated?
None that we know of, do we? No. That's boilerplate language, Jim, just in case something shows up, but there's nothing we have in front of us now.
It's worth asking, and I have some more questions, which I'll go through if you'd like to respond to them. We are aware that the easement is mentioned as 10 feet here, and that there have been some negotiations with the residents nearby. Can you acknowledge that and give us a status of those negotiations and perhaps what you're prepared to commit to?
I think he has done that, hasn't he?
No, I don't think so.
I did.
Did you?
Okay.
Yeah, I just saw a 10-foot, and I think there's a 15-foot discussion going on. So I thought that was worthwhile bringing up. The guest parking indicates there are 4 spaces, and the parking into the northwestern lot, additional spaces are going to be provided there. And that there are also 18 for resident parking. I was wondering if you would add the as required to the guest parking as well. It says 18 or as needed, and I thought the guest parking might also be worthy reviewing later. It indicates only 4 today, and perhaps that would be worthwhile adding. I wasn't clear what the divvy locations were. I think there was a question about that. And then lastly here, there are a number of agreements that have to be done in conjunction with this plan for northwestern parking and also for 2 share car locations. Will those be completed prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy? Thank you.
So just to clarify, yes, we did come to an agreement with the 4 residents, that's what we turned in to you, to do a 15-foot, to allow for a 15-foot easement for a private drive, and to actually build a 10-foot private drive so that we weren't adding any more impervious surface than our original plan. We've agreed to 4 parking spaces for guest parking. Obviously, we would be open to the idea of evaluating that over time if there was a different need or a stronger need for what would happen with the guest parking. We've also identified the divvy spaces are actually located at both of the train stations to the east and to the west of us. I don't know if they actually in place yet? No. Yeah. So those are to be built, correct, Amir?
So the exact locations of the divvy stations those things have not been determined. There was a proposal in front of the Planning and Development Committee, or I'm sorry, the Administration and Public Works Committee this past Monday that showed an initial proposal for 8 stations throughout the city of Evanston. 2 of those 8 stations originally are proposed, one for the Metro station on Central Street and one on the CTA station on Central Street.
And then the last question about the car share, we would anticipate that those would be in place by the time we have a certificate of occupancy. So we have no issue with doing that. We can't come to you and give them. We've tried to talk to both of the providers. Most of the communication was with Zipcar. They won't make a commitment to a project location this far out. It's a long way away for them to actually have the facility. But we are making a commitment to those 2 spaces.
Commissioner Lewis, you have a question?
It's just not clear to me where the 4 guest parking spaces are. They're underground?
They're underground, so they would be inside the garage.
They're not across the
No,
street?
No. We did have an agreement, we still do, to provide parking with Northwestern or with the city who leases some of the parking spaces in that lot across the street. The problem is those are really just daytime leases. They can't be used overnight.
Where would those 2 Central Street car-sharing sites be located?
That's still to be
Is
determined.
that going to be on public street, are you talking about, or?
It could be on a public street. We are open to placing them where, we've had discussions with Northwestern, placing them right across the street. It seems like a very logical place. We don't have that final answer. We're committed to doing it. We don't want, if we put it inside the building, that wouldn't make a lot of sense for any of the public. It certainly would be for our residents. So we're just trying to find that location. I don't know of any place else in Evanston where they've been located on the street. We're not opposed to that, but we're trying to find a location that benefits us and the neighborhood that doesn't necessarily have to be on the street. It's one of those things, even if you put it on the back of the alley of the property, I don't think it would do any good. It's just, adding something back there that we don't need.
I see a hand. Step up, sir.
Thanks. Jeff Smith of Harrison Street. Mr. Majewski, I don't want to misquote you. You said that folks who want to have more than one car really won't be the right kind of tenant for this. Will that be enforced in any way? And I don't mean to put you on the spot. You're not the attorney or the leasing agent. You're the architect. But can the developer commit to having a lease restriction on the vehicles per unit? Yes. Okay. And the second one is would there be a similar lease restriction? And I'm not a big fan of lease restrictions, but because of what you're trying to do here and where you're trying to put it, would there be a lease restriction on business uses of the residential units by the tenants? Because if it becomes a de facto or sub rosa, office building for therapists or I don't know, artists, whatever, then the 4 spaces might not be sufficient.
Good evening. Jarvie Worcester with Real Capital Solutions. I think to answer that quickly, yes, we would be restricting parking. We'd be foolish not to. We would get abused if we couldn't manage it that way. So that would be a restriction in the lease. We have not detailed the rules and regulations of this building as it relates to business use, but given the parking situation, we would strongly we would strongly oppose that and typically wouldn't on a project like this. It's different when you have a live, work, loft type of a product type. We don't here. We believe this is going to be purely residential, and I think the rents that we've underwritten to demand residential and not a business location.
I may be able to provide a clarification on that. As I mentioned earlier, there will be a condition in the ordinance that this project is for residential use multifamily. Any other use will have to come in front of the Plan Commission and the council for changes to the use. So each one of these units is going to be a residential unit. They're not going to be any office uses. The city would not allow that. However, individual residents may opt to run an office as what we call the home occupation. Those things are also regulated by the zoning ordinance of the city. But no, a flat-out office use of one of the units would not be permitted.
Just a clarification. If transit-oriented development does what it's supposed to, and I think in this case, it's a great location, and let's say that half of your units are occupied by people that don't have cars. Now you've got maybe 20 or 25 spaces that are not being used. What are you going to do with them?
We haven't gotten that question yet, but thank you for asking it. That would, if it goes that way, we nailed our market study, frankly. So we think we'll get close. What we do from time to time is, for every person who doesn't have a car, there may be somebody who wants to in a 3-bedroom. We would, basically lease an extra space, put it as a part of the rent requirement. We'd have to work through kind of zoning restrictions there, but effectively, it's going to be for private use within the building. It's going to be a security access building, so it would never be for the use of anybody in the public. Does that answer your question?
Okay. So you're saying that if somebody actually does have 2 cars and you have that extra space, you'd lease it to them?
Only if we were in a situation where the building was fully occupied and we had surplus spaces.
I hope it happens.
Right.
I'm with you.
I do too. But, I think based on what we've looked at, we're going to be pretty close on the ratios that we've set forth.
Yes, ma'am.
Amy O'Keefe, 2535 Ashland in Evanston. John, thank you for everything. And my question for you is actually in regard to the construction plan and the impact of noise to St. Athanasius School during construction. I'm wondering if you might be able to address that.
I think the whole construction plan is one that we've been working on. As Demir mentioned, that's going to be one we're going to be spending a lot of time working with the city on as well. But we have come up with a reasonable agreement as part of your package, I believe, that shows the main construction access will come off of Central Street just because of the activity that's in the alley. There will be points where we'll need to use the alley for some delivery of some materials and then ultimately to build the ramp to go down to it. We've also agreed, and we've been working with Tom on looking at the idea of trying to use zip panels, other panels, and any other pre-paneled construction that we can do to limit the amount of noise that would occur on the project. We've discussed the idea of doing some of the framing once the lower level is built, it's covered up. There's going to be an access point open in the top where the garden is initially, and to do some of the construction, panelized construction on that lower level, and then crane it up. That way it's relatively enclosed, it's not perfect. The main thing that we can do is try to expedite the speed and try to keep the quiet of the construction contained somewhere within the site.
How long would you expect it would take to put the building up?
The schedule, if everything were to go the way we wish it would, would be starting construction sometime in July, with final occupancy being the following June or July. The main goal for us is, I think the part that would be the most bothersome to everybody would be to get the frame of the building up before winter, get it enclosed, and then move the construction inside during the winter period. Most likely then come back and put all the masonry on the exterior of the building during the spring of the following year.
I'm looking for hands. I see one. Yes, ma'am.
Amy Rogers, 2524 Ashland. So I have a couple of quick questions for John or Jarvie. One relates to utilities and other green space relative to LEED. I don't know if you're doing a green roof on the 4th floor and what you're doing with utilities. One is to request a sample lease with your restrictions at some point prior to the approval, as well as an easement that we agree to. And then I had a couple of questions that I don't know are appropriate to ask here or not relative to the city. One is relating to restricting parking on Ashland more than it's currently restricted, and whether or not the city can agree to that as a condition of the approval of this plan. The other relates to whether or not the ability to build garages with variances on the residential properties, we can get approval from the city prior to, or as a condition of the plan committee. So those are my questions.
You know, I did want to clarify, I left out one thing that was in our agreement with the neighbors, is that we would support their effort, if I didn't say that, to do detached garages, because they need to go in to get a variance to do that. They have very peculiar properties in the way that they were divided, but we have agreed to support that. And I'll personally support it whenever they would come up in front of the zoning board. To answer the question on the lease, we're working on trying to get you a lease that would be appropriate for this. The easement will absolutely be taken care of, and it has been taken care of. It just needs to get to be remodified with the arrangements that we've placed. The utilities will all be buried below ground as a part of this development. So the one thing that there is a potential, which we've talked with you about, is that we're leaving from the westerly part of your property 2.5 feet of a green strip, which you'll have to drive across if you want to access some sort of parking area. But we have agreed also that that might be an ideal long-term burial place for you guys to bury utilities, so that you could not have overhead lines going to your property. So we've agreed to that. But all of the utilities have really been worked out. We're just finalizing with Commonwealth Edison how we would actually go about taking down the utilities in the alley. There's a lot of stuff, including overhead wires, that have been done there. It's routinely done. It's very complicated and expensive, but it is routinely done. So I hope that answers your question on the utilities. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think as far as the portions of geothermal and what we'll do, one thing we could provide you is our checklist for the LEED certification. That might actually be very beneficial, so you could see what we get. To be honest with you, we get a bunch of points because we are transit-oriented. We probably can't get more points on a LEED development than we do just because of this location. But there are a whole bunch of other things, and most of it has to do with improving the actual envelope. Things like the garage do have this green roof. There is additional insulation and continuous insulation in these unique panels that we're going to use for insulation. The roof on the top of the building is actually a white roof so that it doesn't gain a lot of solar heat. But right now we do not have geothermal or solar as part of the project. We would not eliminate that or say that that's not a possibility. It's just something that we haven't had a need to do from a point perspective yet. So we can share with you. It's a very simple to read but complicated point checklist, so you'll see how we'll achieve LEED Silver. And that's all third-party identified by a commissioning agent.
I think, though, on Ms. Rogers' questions, staff will correct me on this. I think the garage variances are in the Zoning Board of Appeals jurisdiction, not ours. And the parking restrictions are in somebody else's jurisdiction. So we could beg, but we can't, I think, condition our recommendation on either one of those questions. Could we be committing another agency of the city? But we could beg. Correct me.
That is exactly correct. Just to clarify, the further restrictions for the on-street parking on Ashland Avenue, a petition for that would have to go in front of the Parking and Traffic Commission. Upon a really substantial study that there is an issue, ultimately, the city would conduct surveys, et cetera, and then the changes to the on-street parking restrictions would take place at that time. So that goes in front of the Parking and Traffic Commission. In regards to the variances, as Chairman Ford had indicated, each individual property owner that is looking to build either a parking slab or a detached garage would have to meet whatever the requirements are for that lot in terms of setback, height, lot coverage, impervious surface coverage, et cetera. So if a proposal for one of those things does not meet any of these requirements, then that will be processed as a variance that can be approved either by staff, if it's a minor variance, or if it's a major variance, it would have to go in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Chris Kahn of Ashland. There's been reference to an agreement for parking across the street with Northwestern, and I'm not clear on if that's a firm agreement, a potential agreement, and where that stands. Mostly my concern being that Ashland is a very unique street from parking, both from the university, from all the people that live on the street, and from game days and things like that. So I wanted to understand where that stood and if that was firm.
Where we're firm is that we can get the parking that we need during the construction part of the project. That does not appear to be an issue. The point that we ran into that becomes a problem is we can't provide, as of now, overnight parking. So the Northwestern parking beyond that point doesn't provide a huge benefit to try to meet some of the requests of the neighbors to add more guest parking over there. But we have, and we continue to talk to some of the other landowners that do have potential excess parking to get a better idea of what's required. Again, we always want to make it clear that we're very comfortable with where our parking is, but we are willing to investigate adding potential parking.
It's the guest stuff that I'm talking
Yeah.
about, frankly. I mean, we can say all day long that they don't guess what they do, so, and they will talk national, so having an overflow spot that they can easily access is why.
Right, and so I think out of respect, we are continuing to try to find solutions to that, and I think they will develop. I think overall, as Damiris said, we've agreed that this will be a part of the lease that they are not allowed to provide. The neighbor's concern is valid. These are guests, so they're not people who would be doing it. It will never be perfect, I understand that. Right now, there's a lot of concern because there's a great deal, a number of brokers that are parking because Caldwell Banker has moved over to that area. So the neighborhood is kind of evolving. Things are getting busier. We're respectful of that. We are trying to find some solutions to that for additional guest parking. We know that that won't happen at the church, though.
Thank you. Very well. Then we will now invite, one more.
I would like to ask and clarify.
I'm sorry, your name, please?
Sorry, Pat Feeney, 1606 Central.
Yes,
I would
thank
like
you.
to ask and clarify the locations of the balconies on the east side of the building and the distance from the balconies to the existing homes, and if they're still facing into windows on that side of the property.
Yeah, absolutely. The slide that would be most beneficial is the one that's actually up here right now. Your townhouse would be on the left side of the red dashed box. So those are the townhouses and the portion that they would face. On the left side, it's actually just the brick residents with their homes. This is a good one to show as well. You can go to that, but it shows that the balconies do not project out. We've pulled those into the building, so that next image shows that.
But the balconies are on the east side and are facing ours and are only 25 feet away from our bedroom window, is that correct?
I think they might be 24 and a half feet, but yeah, I think that
Looking into our bedroom.
there are balconies on that side. We've tried to work with you to provide whatever landscaping we can do to buffer that, and we've tried to shift the windows the best we possibly could.
Ms. Feeney? Thank you. Other questions? If not, then we will take public testimony. If there is anyone who wishes to present testimony who has not signed in. Is there a clean sign-in sheet? Okay, there's a clean sign-in sheet here at the staff table. Donald Dixon. Is Mr. Dixon? Ah, okay. Ms. Black, do you want to speak?
Well, yes, I will speak.
Okay.
About this same issue, I think, that the other lady raised. Although I had a private meeting with Mr. Majewski quite early on and offered that they could come and see our homes and how close we are to that building, nobody ever contacted us. So I don't know what you're having on that west side. Forget about outside lights. I got that. It's the windows and the balconies and their proximity to our windows and our balconies that I don't yet have a real grasp of.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, I will ask Mr. Majewski whether he wants to respond to testimony as we go, or do you want to include that in your closing statement?
I'm fine hopping up. I can't remember that much, so I'll try. Respectfully, we did meet in the beginning, but we also had a meeting with 3 of your residents twice. So you weren't there, but we did meet to talk about. You were invited. It was the president who told me that everybody was invited. So you're not the current president. You were the past president, correct?
Never been the president.
Okay. So we did meet with your association, and we walked through the view. We walked through the elements. I'm more than happy to talk to you directly. I don't ever believe that by having a meeting with that, it solves everything. But we did have the opportunity to meet and have that discussion initially about the balconies. Where your particular unit is located, the building is well over probably about 75 feet away from you. So, right. And then again, I think nothing's perfect, but I think we've improved the view based on the fact that where that existing building was, for some of the residents, and especially for the resident that was just talking about it, it was only 5 feet away, and we've moved it on this side to 10 feet away, and then pulled it back. So there is some impact for the residents at the front. It's a benefit slightly to the residents that are at the back. Can we see the other side of that? Does that pop up? And blow it up too. The part that, I'm trying to work with the neighbors on the east side as well, and if you could put the mouse where their unit is, and all the way up at the top. I'm very respectful of what's going on, but they were only 5 or 6 feet away from their property line where the existing building was located. So you can see the red line of that facade. And I understand that that's the world that they've been living in, and we're trying to help out, but we're pulling the building a full 19 foot 10 inches further back away from their unit. So yes, there are some windows and there are balconies stacked there, but we're hoping to provide some benefit by just the relief that we're providing by pulling the building back. Again, this has been a give and take working with everybody around the site.
Larry Klein.
Larry Klein, 1606 Central. How is this project addressing low-income housing?
I guess that's a question to Mr. Majewski, or
That's a question to Mr. Majewski. Also, in the presentation, the shading of the buildings was shown at various times, and what was not mentioned was that basically on the east and west side, the buildings will basically be shaded 2/3 of the day on either side of the building, or I'm sorry, at least more than half of the day on each side of the building. In the morning on the west side and in the afternoon on the east side. This was not presented, it was shown but not presented and fairly illustrated. Secondly, my unit on 1606, which is across from somebody's balcony, even though it has been moved further away, will have somebody's living room looking into the bedroom. And it was tried to be covered by putting a tree in the view. And before I die, that tree will never be high enough to cover my bedroom window. So this is some points that I'd like to raise. The traffic studies were made prior to the restaurant going in, and basically, I don't think it addresses the traffic flow, the traffic situation and parking that we will now experience. And those are some of the points that I just wanted to bring.
Thank you. Briefly, Mr. Majewski.
Yes, the project does not address low-income housing. It is not required to because they are rental units and not condominiums. We have, as a firm, made a big commitment to Evanston to doing a pro bono project for low-income housing. You will not find anybody more dedicated than the people who work in my office to that effort, but that is not the current requirement for this property. It is absolutely market rate housing. I can't tell you that the idea is something that will ever change. I know there's been discussions, but we are following the rules as they apply today. Yes, the building will have residences that look into or across from the questions that were brought up, but there are currently office windows that are also in that location, and they're much closer. It was an existing use, but it's a different type of use. And we are very open to working with the landscaping, especially with you. We've had an opportunity to work with just about every other resident. We'd be more than happy to try to do something. I understand it's not an instant solution, but we would be willing to work with you to see if there's a beneficial way that we can work with you on the landscaping.
Deborah Ritchie. Yes. You are signed in. Do you wish to speak? You don't have to speak. John Walsh. Mr. Walsh.
I don't have any further comments in light of Mr. Majewski's presentation.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Hughes?
No further comments.
Thank you. Ms. O'Keefe.
Thanks. I think my purpose in coming up here today is probably twofold. One, it's to celebrate the really collaborative design that the Majewski team and all of the neighborhood have taken together in the context of the zoning that's being perceived. I mean, it's really, as somebody who works professionally in collaborative design and negotiation, it's been a pleasure to be part of that. But I would ask us to all step back and look at the 01 zoning and really question if we're taking the right approach on this. And I don't know if you'd be willing to maybe just zone out a little bit and the project that you have. I'd just like to point out a couple of things. The properties over to the right or on the east side, those lots are 30 by 100 feet. So I think for many of us used to looking at plans, you think of a standard lot as being 50 by 150. These lots are less than 50% the size of a standard lot. And so when we look at that and we consider that the front of the building is facing Central Street, but what's considered the side of the building would typically be considered the rear for those properties on Ashland, if you think about it in other contexts, right? Does that make sense? That what's happening on the side of the building and the sorts of setbacks that are required are absolutely in line with what would be required for a standard lot where the next buildings were also positioned so that the side abutted. But this isn't a standard zoning situation. It's a situation that we all agree is really very diverse. And that the treatment of the side of this building in conjunction with these very small lots that face the side, I think that we should just step back and question whether 01 is appropriate here. If our intention as a community is really to infill this relatively small space with a building of this mass, and if the overall benefit to the community really is net positive. And so, I mean, those are my overall questions. Just to give you some context, I'm a native Evanstonian. My husband and I have been in our house on Ashland for about 13 years. chose to raise our children there. My children go to St. A's, and I'm vice chair of the school board there. I'm absolutely invested in the property and the neighborhood. I have some pictures if you'd like to see them of Central Street as it's evolved. I think there are so many developments to celebrate on Central Street. Definitely Central Street Station is an improvement over the old movie theaters that were there. I think we can all agree on that. And it's wonderful that things like tags have stayed very much the same. So as we all come together and really look at how to make sure that this collective design is something that is beneficial, I would ask that the volume, the height, and the increased density really be taken into consideration given the uniqueness of the abutting properties. And sincere thanks to the whole team. So.
Thank you. Carl Bova, do I have that right? Bova?
Stepped over to the Harley Clark meeting.
Aha. Well, okay. Jeff Smith.
Thank you, members of the commission, Mr. Majewski, and members of the development team. My name is Jeff Smith, and I live at 2724 Central. Professionally, my credentials that I've, as an attorney, represented developers, contractors, condominium associations, condominium unit owners, single-family home residents, townhome residents, neighborhood associations, and municipalities, as well as people who've sued all those foregoing categories of clients and people who are being sued by them. And so I'm very familiar with a lot of the dynamics of the development and property development process. I put my citizen and lay credentials probably ahead of those because I've lived a total of 39 years within 2 miles of this room, and almost 25 of those years in the Central Street neighborhood, 1 block off of Central Street. I've probably made about 10,000 trips down Central Street, and at least 3,000 of those have been on foot or on bike. It adds up to about 2/3 of a work year walking or biking through Central Street. And during the development of the Central Street Master Plan and the negotiation and adoption of the overlay ordinance, I was the president of the Central Street Neighbors Association. Conservatively put 500 hours, and easily it could have been 1,000 into the plan and the ordinance, including along with some other members of the organization, measuring the height and uses of every structure from Grosse Pointe Road to the stadium. And every single point of the plan and every single point of the ordinance was heavily discussed, negotiated, and alternatives were considered. So it was not something that was entered into lightly. Commissioners Galloway and Opdyke were, I believe, on the commission at the time, and I'm not sure anybody else here was, perhaps Mr. Peters during part of that. Maybe not. So you'll forgive me a little bit of that. I hope the rest of you will forgive me a little bit of that history lesson, but it's part of the why this is factual testimony. The purpose of the ordinance was manifold, but one of them was to guide how redevelopment would occur, and you often heard the phrase at the time to make the east side of the Metro Tracks a little more like the west side, which was heavily celebrated and cherished by the residents who spoke up at that point. Everybody acknowledged that as is, it wasn't. It is a slightly different creature. But when and if a building like 1620 was to be replaced, the idea was that it would conform to the plan and the ordinance, and that over time the streetscape would be reshaped. A goal was indeed to leverage transit orientation of the community. The means to do that was never envisioned to be to reduce on-site parking. The experience in Evanston, as far as I know, is not bearing out that buildings are reducing the amount of car ownership. If anything, the amount of car ownership in Evanston has gone up at the same time as we've seen a lot of development in the city. And part of that's because For example, on Central Street, there is no east-west transit at night. The 201 bus stops running. The CTA has eliminated the 201N that used to run from Howard Street and terminated Evanston Hospital. On Sundays, there's no bus service. The former Grant Street bus doesn't run there anymore. The Green Bay bus doesn't come up Green Bay. You can't get to this neighborhood by bus on a Sunday, and which also means that you can't get from 1620 Central, if you want to go to Macy's for a sale on Sunday, you can't get there by bus, you can't get there by mass transit, because Metro's not going to get you there, and the CTA is not going to get you there. So people end up having cars. If you have a job in Morton Grove, you're moving, or Glenview, you're going east-west, and people are still going to have probably at least one car. So one of my recommendations and requests of the committee would be that not just the deeded parking spaces, but that the actual vehicle ownership, if we're going to have a request for a deviation from what's mandated as the number of parking spaces, that actually be made a condition of the lease, because otherwise all risk that the projections are wrong, all risk that transit-oriented density hopes don't come to fruition, and that people end up with 1.5 cars per unit rather than 1 car per unit, all that risk falls on the neighborhood residents. In a neighborhood where parking can already be stressed, and where during weekdays you can see it flowing for several blocks in either direction, north and south of Central Street. And we're seeing that at both ends of the corridor. The Sotheby's on about 3000 West is having the same effect as the Coldwell Banker in the 1600 block. So that would be one recommendation. The comment about the O-zoning was a very good question. The Central Street neighbors at the time had the same concerns as to why this should be O-zoning. Under O-zoning, as a matter of right, the developer could come in and build a hotel or a dormitory. So the potential or threat, if you're a resident, of having somebody looking into your bedroom window from a building tall and close pre-existed. If anything, the Central Street overlay ordinance, by reducing the mass and height, reduced that threat a little bit, made it a little bit profitable. Unfortunately, I don't think we've seen as much of the real market response to what's allowed as we would have hoped for, and that is why the Central Street Neighbors Association opposed relaxing the ban on site development allowances, and would have preferred to see things done through the zoning variance process, because when you have regulatory certainty, markets adjust to that and it becomes predictable, and that was a goal of the ordinance. When you don't have that certainty, and then pricing, instead of adjusting to something that's going to be fairly predictable, instead has an element of speculation and gamesmanship, and we end up with the possibility of politics, and that reduces trust in city government and produces dissent and tension. So I don't mean to be negative on that, and I'm not saying that has happened here. And if anything, it's clear that most of the planned development guidelines have been met, and personally I would applaud the developer and the architect's efforts both to respect and conform to the existing built environment. There's been evident sensitivity to neighbor concerns, even though every concern and desire may not have been met and may not be met, but there's clearly been a laudable effort. The shadow study is one of the most thorough that I've seen for a project this size in the city of Evanston, and it's refreshing to see the honesty and authenticity in that, covering the various seasons, and the landscaping renderings showing as installed is very important. I put in arbor vitae 10 years ago, and they've grown about 2 feet. So you're right, you're not going to see that you know, unless you're putting in weed trees, and I hope you're not, there's been a refreshing amount of effort here, and it's really laudable. They haven't pushed it to the absolute limits of the envelope, and then asked for more and more beyond that, or at least it's come to that phase. And I would say it's not optimally consistent with all the goals of the Central Street plan at the time. One of the things we wanted to do was to avoid a canyonized cookie-cutter corridor like you might see in many of the arteries in Chicago, where they throw a different color brick on, you've got a bunch of balconies sticking out, and I think a lot of that's going to look very dated 20 years from now, and some of the planners may regret that. The fact that this is set back and recessed somewhat, and that it uses existing trees, that the balconies are helping to break up the front facade is again laudable. The plan did want to avoid all residential buildings to the extent possible, especially all residential massing, and to have more active ground uses. But because the O zoning was not changed here, that active ground use only applies to retail and to multi-use, which this is not. So it's you can't always get what you want there. The step backs is a matter of concern, because that was a subject of many hours of discussion during the development of the plan. If you look at the goals of the plan and of the ordinance that are stated in the city documents, as Mr. Majewski seems to recognize, a goal is to reduce that vertical, the sense and perception of vertical massing on the street for pedestrians, for people driving, for people patronizing nearby businesses. And key to that was moving the upper stories back somewhat. Although this is already set back a little further than it needs to be from the lot line, having the step back only on the fourth floor, I would like to see a rendering from a pedestrian's point of view. It seems to me that it's still going to appear to be a fairly vertical building, and the use of aluminum, even though the front is broken up somewhat. Again, that's something that we're seeing a lot of. I just finished a stint working in the Thompson building, the JRTC.
Mr. Smith, how are we doing?
Wrapping up.
Thank you.
So if I would encourage, I wouldn't make it a condition if I was on the commission, a little more articulation. I know that the Majewski firm is extremely creative, and if a little more could be done to make this a unique landmark building that we'll be just as proud of 100 years from now, as or at least 50 as the day it goes up, that would be great. The step backs, I would urge adherence to a little greater adherence to the spirit of the plan in order to reduce the sense of verticalness that's unfortunately right now reinforced by the columnar aspect of the front of the building. That's all I've got, and by and large, it really is. I think really an acknowledgement that the ordinance and the plan can work if people try and respect it.
Thank you. Ms. Rogers?
Hi, I'd like to affirm what Amy O'Keefe said, and also just address whether the commission believes that the height of the building as it relates to the residential properties should be the same height as the Central Street corridor. And then I have two other things. One is the street flow in the area, especially since they've made Eastwood two-way to the first alley, creates quite a bit of confusion, congestion, and it also has a lot of delivery trucks and things that are blocking at least one lane of traffic. And I think that the street flow, especially on Eastwood, but also on Ashland, needs to be addressed for this project, as well as the alley flow, because there will be so many more cars. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Feeney?
I'd just like to reiterate some 1606 Central. I've lived in Evanston for 30 years and on Central Street about 13 months. Buying that property because that area was zoned as office next to us. So to say that having a residence built there looking into my home is an improvement over an office because it's 10 feet away is disingenuous. Offices close, residences don't. I will be driven out of my home office by the construction for 2 years. I look at the development schedule and I see no provisions made for the children who have to be in school and live next to a construction zone for 2 years. It will go on while they're in school. I look at this and I see a loading zone next to the children's music room at St. A's, and it's hard for me to see how this is great for the neighborhood. I see that it's a vision of Central Street to have affordable housing, and yet I was told last July that if we had a PUD, we could circumvent this affordable housing, and we could have more units of luxury housing that would be as expensive as the 80 units that were just built down the street, that start at $1,500 for an efficiency and go up to about $3,300. This is not by anyone's stretch of an imagination affordable housing. And I think it would be very difficult to find people in Evanston who think that we need more luxury apartments. I feel betrayed by this. I bought this with an understanding there would be city zoning, that their sitting zoning was one thing, and then you have a planned unit development. After the mayor and alderman said only 7 years ago that this was a sacred zone, that there would be no PUDs in this area. Now this is thrown out, you've circumvented it, and you've hurt me and a lot of other people.
Thank you, ma'am. Maureen Rosati.
Thank you, Mr. Ford and committee members, and thank you, John, and your team for meeting with us on quite a few occasions. I've lived on Ashland for approximately 11 years. It is an unusual block. It's a tight block. You have a school there that operates 9 months out of the year. The football stadium is right across the street. It's not just football games that affect the block, but there are many, many other Northwestern events. All of these things combine to make this a very lively neighborhood, a fun neighborhood, except when Ohio State fans come. But they get a little rowdy. However, the block has gotten a lot more congested. Just watering my flower boxes on Ashland, I've witnessed mirrors getting clipped, car doors getting smashed. There were 2 very serious accidents on Ashland in the past 9 months. In one, you probably read about it, a UPS truck hit a woman at the corner and she was trapped under the truck for 30 minutes. My neighbor was struck by a drunk driver going the wrong way on Ashland. That's another complication. When there are Northwestern football games, the traffic flow is changed, and I think certain drivers don't realize it's a one-way street going southbound. So my concern is that the 47 or so, the cars from the 47 or so spaces, John, will, rather than follow the rule when they emerge onto the alley, follow the sign that you're putting up that says right turn only. I'm very concerned that human nature being what it is, they will go left and they will add to the traffic on Ashland. Many, many school children out there running in the street from K through 8. And I know, John, you said that it's difficult to put in the pork chop, the curbs that kind of guide people and force them to go to the right. But I think that would be a very good safety measure. John, I think, said that that's not the favorite way of dealing with this traffic. Pork chop is not popular, but Ashland is becoming extremely crowded, busy, and I think increasingly unsafe. Thank you.
Thank you. Those, pardon me, those are the only names I have for people wishing to testify. If there is no further public testimony, I will ask Mr. Majewski to make any brief closing comments he wishes to make.
In the spirit of moving things along and appreciating all the time we've spent so far, I think, there were kind of three sets of comments that I did not jump up and talk about immediately after. Many of the things, we are fine having the parking not being permitted on any of the public streets as a condition of the lease. That's actually an agreement that we've already made. I understand that the buses do close and that that's not happening all the time. There are diversely different kinds of transportation that are continually all evolving. I would have never thought that something like Uber or Lyft would make the difference it makes today. I can't believe that I use that. People wonder why you'd ever take that instead of taking a taxi or something, because it's there. You know when it's coming. So I think the transportation needs do exist. We are only a couple of blocks away from Metra. We are 5 blocks away from the other primary traffic source. And again, we do have the ability to get good access when we are providing at least one parking space, which is what we think. So I do respect the comments about what they tried to work with. We did ask the neighbors if they thought that retail or office was appropriate for this site. We were open to that. We just said, is that something that you would like to see? It was pretty much unanimous. I'm not going to speak for everybody because there's clearly some people who would prefer to see something different than what we're doing there. But it was relatively uniform that the idea of introducing office or retail was not appropriate. Absolutely was the feeling on retail. I understand the idea of trying to hope that Central Street will keep evolving, but it really makes a change at Eastwood. It really does. You switch from a very active retail type of environment, then you switch on our side of the street going east to primarily a residential aspect. And it's just the way it is. Yes, things are going to happen with Northwestern across the street. There will be evolution. Hopefully they'll reinforce it. Hopefully theirs will add more dynamic aspects to the site. I think there's great opportunities across the street for development. It will change. I do think it's obvious that as change will come, parking is still going to be an important part of it. I can't stress that if there's something I could benefit or help with, or we wish we could do more with, is to bring the city and Northwestern together to talk about solving some of the parking solutions. They have so much parking sitting there that is just not being used. I realize the town-gown relationship is difficult, but it's not impossible. And if a development were to occur, I know it's tricky with Northwestern, but parking is still going to be an important part of any future that happens with the stadium. The stadium's not going away, and there's going to be a need for parking. I respect the idea that the existing zoning might be the best underlying zoning, and if a neighbor moved in, things change. The zoning, honestly, was completely confusing when we started. That's one of the reasons this text amendment happened. I can't tell you that we really understood the zoning when we thought we understood the zoning. But what we did understand was once we got to the bottom line of it, we're here for a PD because there's no other option. We also understand that this is permitted, that residential is permitted within the current zoning as a special use. So we do feel that it's very appropriate. I really appreciate the Ohio State comment since I went to Michigan, so thank you. That was the best thing I heard all night. But the pork chop, we are willing to work, but a pork chop is not a good idea as you're coming up a ramp and trying to make a turn. If you guys know, the pork chop is where it's a raised curb that directs you in a traffic flow. We would be really willing to work with the city and the traffic folks at the city to find a solution that works best for both of us. I don't think it's going to be the pork chop, but I think there's a solution that can be had, so we're open to working out that idea.
Thank you. Staff, do you want to make a brief, or have we said everything we need to say?
I think the only item that we would point out that the changes to the plans will have to one way or the other, be submitted at a later point. The project, if it is approved by the city council, does have to go in front of the design and project review, DAPR, once more before the permit is issued. At that time, we would again review the plans to make sure they do comply with the plans shown tonight and those that were shown to be different on the east elevation. And then we probably need those plans to be submitted before Planning and Development Committee. I think that really is all that we need to say.
Thank you. That being the case, then we will close the public hearing record. I'm going to suggest that we take what do you want, folks? Let's take a 10-minute stand-up. But before we do, I just want to say, listening to Mr. Majewski and listening to the public, I have really been impressed by the general tone of we're really trying to work together here. We've been in hearings, you've been in hearings where that was not the case. And I think some of us looked at the number of cars in the parking lot tonight and said, uh-oh. And this has not been an uh-oh occasion. So I just want to thank you all very much for the mood, the atmosphere of we're trying to get along and get this done that you brought in tonight. Having said that, we will now recess for 10 minutes. Right, we will now proceed to commission deliberation. During this time, there may be additional questions for the petitioner or other members of the public as this discussion goes on. I'm going to suggest that any commissioner who wishes to speak briefly, make whatever general comments they wish to make about the project, and in particular identify what seem to them to be issues that we need to address. We won't stop to discuss those immediately. I just want to develop sort of an agenda of what are the problems we need to address and what are the problems we don't. By the time we get through, we will need to have addressed the issues of consistency of the project with the comprehensive plan of the city, with the Central Street plan, with the standards for planned developments and the standards for special use. And on the matter of special use, we will need to make a specific finding on each of those 9 points. So I will open it for brief statements of response to the project and particular issues that anyone has. Oh, people.
Well, I think traffic has been identified as something that perhaps we could address, especially the Ashland and that alley situation. I'm not sure. I don't have any solutions, but maybe we could discuss that a bit.
Okay. Commissioner Lewis.
Yeah, I guess I would think that I have to agree that the risk of, in any of these TODs, that the risk of the limited parking should not be placed on the residents around, and would like to investigate, I was looking at KLOA's traffic study, and they're talking about unrestricted parking on Ashland and various places, so I'm wondering how that can help. I think visitor parking is the real key to this, since they have addressed the residential part, the residences not having, but if it's unrestricted parking, how can that be addressed? Surprisingly, I think the critters, I think is what they said. I think it's interesting that if it is a vacant building, that we might think about rodent control as part of the construction plan when they go and demolish this building, whether it can be, actually not let those guys go someplace. It's a little minor thing, but very active, and I think the lease restriction on the parking is something we should consider also.
Other commissioner comments? We have a request from the petitioner for 4 development allowances. Upper story, I forget what the exact word is, but setback in the front, setback in the back, the screening on the loading dock, and the parking allowance. Do any commissioners want to address the issues of either the setbacks or the loading dock screening problem?
Well, I'd like a clarification from staff, if I can. Is this truly a setback issue, or the pyramid?
Setback's the wrong word. It's the
Pyramid. This building complies with all the required setbacks, except at the step-back condition. Is that?
You can define it, that, yes, correct.
Well, then let me, if there's no comment on the step-backs request, then let me ask about the issue of on-site parking. The developer has asked for a reduction in the number of parking spaces which the ordinance requires given the number of bedrooms. His consultant has presented information on other developments in Evanston which indicate that, which suggest, if you will, that the parking limits set in the ordinance are higher than what we're in fact experiencing in other multifamily buildings. Any commissioners want to comment on that on-site parking issue? Commissioner Pugozzi, you're thinking.
You know, real simply, there's really no other solution that I can see based on the extent of the development other than taking a story off of the building, which probably makes the project not feasible. So I don't think it's a stretch. I think in Chicago it would ironically meet their parking requirement for such a development. And I know that one of the points you get for the city's mandated LEED Silver certification is a reduction in the zoning ordinance for required parking spaces, because the thought is that if you build the parking space, people are more likely to acquire a car. I'm not saying I agree with that, but that's the logic behind it. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the logic. In a nutshell, I don't know how anyone else could develop this property in a way that would make it buildable from a market perspective, unless they have that request. It is refreshing to see that the parking is all underground, unlike the property that currently exists, unlike St. A's, and certainly unlike Ryan Field. It's always a benefit to avoid a sea of asphalt. So I can appreciate the effort made to make the open space beyond the building envelope to at least make it green space as opposed to surface parking. So I think that should be noted. I don't have an objection to the request. I know that there definitely is a trend in the younger generations, not myself not included, not to be so dependent on cars. I mean, that's a fact. I think people are it terrifies the auto industry, but I think people are not acquiring cars the way older generations have. So, enough said, I guess.
Thank you. Rich, sure.
I think you can almost describe Evanston as having very little space to develop or redevelop and a terrible parking problem. And one of the ways of addressing that is buying into transit-oriented development. And I don't think the term overcrowding, I hear that used a lot when they talk about transit-oriented development, but it's not. It's more putting, I guess, more people livable in a smaller space. I don't see any way around it. I think this building addresses it as best they can. There is no perfect solution. And Evanston is always going to have very little land available for development or redevelopment, and parking's always going to be a problem. I don't think this is going to add to it. And the risk really is on the developer, but we can help with tying down any restriction on the rental agreement. I think that is something that probably they want to do, and I think that we should recommend.
And what would be the content of that? How would you, of that limitation?
I think it was suggested that there would be one deeded parking spot per unit. Period. And one other thing, if it works, then maybe the guest parking problem won't be as big a problem. They'll have some empty spaces there.
Commissioner Peters?
We had some testimony in a prior case. We had some testimony in a prior case about one space or less than one space per apartment would be appropriate. And most of the audience, and they weren't as polite as this audience, said that they thought the testimony given by Scott Bernstein was clearly false. I had occasion to look carefully at the census tracts, not here, not in this area, and I was quite astonished to find out the testimony was supported. We have a lot of apartments where the average car ownership is one car per unit or less than one car per unit, not necessarily small apartments, but near transit development. And so I'm sort of confident that this will probably work and that the market research indicating a market for this is appropriate. We had some testimony tonight that one of the objectives of the Central Street plan is to have the area east of the metro station look like west of the metro station. But when I think of Central Street, there's an elephant in the room, and that's Dyke Stadium and the surrounding surface parking. And then I did a survey looking at the setbacks on the street. And on the north side of the street, it's mostly close to zero setback or zero setback. And on the south side of the street, and also on the north side of the street, there are townhouses set at right angles to the street with blank walls. This is not an area that looks like the area west of Central Street, nor is it an area that's going to, in the future, look like that, until Northwestern decides to tear down Dyke Stadium and build something else. And I have no doubt that they're not going to build something small when they do it. this is a fairly dense area. But I do agree that a lease restriction to try to make limited car ownership by people living in the units, and I won't say deeded because we don't know if it's rental or condominium, limit the number of cars they have is appropriate, and the limitation should probably be one car. And that between now and the time planning and development considers this, an effort should be made to deal with the guest parking problem, because there's likely to be more than 4 guests some of the time, and I wouldn't want to see them on Ashland. One of the residents, one of the people who testified on Ashland suggested that there should be greater restrictions to this property because the lots on Ashland were small. But I don't buy it. I think because the neighboring lots are small, greater restriction shouldn't be imposed on this property. My lot is 40 by 60. It never occurred to me that therefore the neighbors, what they could build should be further restricted. It happened in 1896, and it's been there a long time. But it doesn't occur to me that's a basis for a restriction for neighboring property. I just have to sort of live with a small lot. So I think we need to recommend that the visitor parking problem be solved, that the lease restriction be solved. I'm not sure I want pet restrictions in a zoning ordinance when the pets are in the building. But that's sort of my comments on some of the areas. And I think that Evanston Police and the traffic engineers should be able to come forward with an enforceable way to prevent people from making the wrong turn in the alley. Evanston is short of revenue. They're very happy to give tickets if the appropriate ordinances are adopted. And I think that's a solution here. And frankly, the parking tickets here are expensive enough that people will learn. That's sort of general comments on what I've seen.
Thank you. Commissioner Peters did introduce an uncertainty that I didn't think was an uncertainty. This is rental property, yes? Okay, so that a lease restriction is what we're talking about. Terrific. Okay, thank you. Stuart Updike.
I think there are many, many laudable aspects to this project. If I had a vote, I would vote in favor of it, but I don't have a vote. And I'm impressed with the developers' considerable efforts to accommodate the concerns of the neighbors. Not everyone is satisfied, of course, but I think they've made a very noble effort to do that. I think it was about a month ago when we were talking about the project at 1571 Maple Street. And if memory serves, there were, I think, 120 units, rental units, and they had 13 parking spots on site. 13 parking spots on site. And it passed through the Plan Commission unanimously. This project has many, many more parking spots available, more than one per unit. And these are two projects that are fairly similarly situated as far as proximity to transportation and so on. So that's. I'm not saying that we should have a lease restriction, but those are my recollections as far as 1571 Maple is concerned. I think there's plenty of parking here.
Mr. Galloway?
First off, I concur with Mr. Schur, Mr. Peters, and Mr. Updike's comments. I think this has been a wonderful and thorough and extremely coherent presentation, first off. I've been on the commission as voting and non-voting for more than 8 years. I have never seen a project, particularly of this size and scale, so thoroughly documented, so painstakingly, such a painstaking effort to work out subtle details in response to community input, and so well communicated. You've obviously made extremely wonderful use of the computer technologies that afford you to show what happens when a certain change is imposed upon a project. So I'm extremely impressed. I think it's a splendid design. I am thrilled to not see a pasty dormers and a colonial faux facade on a building for a change. I think the scale of the building is absolutely appropriate for the environment. I am certainly impressed by the manner in which the developer has put his money where his mouth is as it relates to transit-oriented development. These are not neophyte developers or neophyte architects. They've done their research, and the trend in any progressive city in the country is towards emphasizing transit-oriented development, both as a result of the sustainable environmental and energy aspects of it, but moreover for the quality of life that it offers so many residents, and the transformation that it can have in so many struggling cities, and even those cities such as Evanston, which have so many unique amenities that make it an ideal candidate for transit-oriented development. I have no concerns about the resident parking, and given the supreme effort put forward by the architect and the developer on all aspects of this project that we've seen to date, I have every faith that they will work to improve the situation as it relates to guest parking. And I would not make that a condition of approval of this project if I had a vote. It's oftentimes when your life is affected by a change that is unanticipated, we all tend to start to focus on certain details of our lives that now we believe will be affected by this change. And we burrow in on those details. And this is true of me. I think it's true of anyone. And as a result, I will tend to overinflate the importance of these details, which, prior to this particular change may not have even entered my mind. I respect all the concerns of the neighbors, and I agree with the chairman's comments in regards to the level of decorum and teammanship that's been present here today. I really believe that any of your concerns on the part of you neighbors, once this project is completed, will be assuaged. And I'm certainly very confident that another project that could be built on this site would be far less attractive and would pose far more concerns for you.
Thank you. Anything further from members of the commission? Then we must make an explicit decision with respect to the standards for special uses. Do we have a slide? Can you find the slide, or do you want me to read? Okay. In the meantime, I will start. I'm not going to ask for a vote on each of these. I will sort of listen for a murmur up here that says yes or no. We are required to find the following. A, that the project is one of the special uses specifically listed in the zoning ordinance. I believe that condition has been met. There we go. Second, it is in keeping with the purposes and policies of the adopted comprehensive general plan and the zoning ordinance as amended from time to time. The staff memo identifies the points on which the project is compatible with the comprehensive plan. C, it will not cause a negative cumulative effect when its effect is considered in conjunction with the cumulative effect of various special uses of all types on the immediate neighborhood and the effect of the proposed type of special use upon the city as a whole. The cumulative impact rule. Does anyone have any comments on that one? It does not interfere with or diminish the value of property in the neighborhood. The developer's submittal suggests that, given that this is redevelopment of effectively a vacant parcel, an unused parcel, that it will at least enhance the property value in the neighborhood to that extent, and that the addition of this quality of development may in fact have a beneficial effect rather than a negative effect on property values in the neighborhood overall. Any commissioners wish to comment on that standard? Commissioner Peters.
I think one of the relevant questions in looking at that standard is to compare the proposal to what could be built as of right, or more specifically, without any development changes. And I think this is pretty well designed to minimize the impact, particularly as modified in comparison with what could be constructed at this site. I also think it is consistent with the area. There was testimony that people will look from this building into windows. And I think that is true, and I would find such a change distressing. But I also recognize we're in a fairly dense urban area, and what could be built could be much worse in terms of people looking into windows. So I don't find that as a sufficient reason to conclude that this standard is not met. And I appreciate and sympathize with those who said people will look in my windows. I once lived on 3.5 acres in an urban area. It was great. Now I live on a tiny lot. People look in my windows. But there's pedestrians going by all the time, and the activity in the area is absolutely terrific. So that's a trade-off for living in a place like Evanston. That's comments on that standard.
Thank you, sir.
It may be hard to tell that it's that standard.
No, I knew where you were. I'm going to miss you, Peters. I just let the record show that I'm going to miss Peters.
This is my last meeting. I'm going to celebrate. But I also thank everyone here, particularly the commissioners and staff, for what they do.
Continuing with the standards for special uses. E, it can be adequately served by public facilities and services. Staff, there's no question here about water, sewer,
No.
electric, all of that. Okay. does not cause undue traffic congestion. We have heard concerns about traffic flow in the alley and about parking. The developer's submittal from his traffic engineer indicates that his judgment that the addition to traffic during the morning and afternoon rush hours will be minimal. Further comments on that from commissioners? Commissioner Lewis.
Was there any I mean, it's an existing office complex. Was there any comparison to what it would be if that was a fully occupied office with, you know, however much parking there was? Mr. Russell?
Sure. Eric Russell, KLOA. We did do that comparison in our report, and we found with that office space fully occupied, during the peak times, the office use would generate about twice as much traffic as what's being proposed from this project as a residential, being that it's a transit-oriented development. And over a 24-hour period, the office would still generate about 15% more. So just, I guess, to keep in mind, there was traffic at one time going in and out of that property from the alley when it was an office space. And while this project will still generate traffic into the alley, it'll be less traffic than would have been there at full occupancy.
Thank you. G, it preserves significant historical and architectural resources. That is not a relevant standard in this case. Preserves significant natural and environmental features. Again, not a relevant question in this case. If it appears, if anything, to improve natural and environmental features. Finally, it complies with all other applicable regulations of the district in which it is located and other applicable ordinances, except to the extent such regulations have been modified through the plan development process or the grant of a variance, I think we meant. I think if we act positively on the project, it will then have, regulations will have been modified through the plan development process, and it will meet them. Now, then, Commissioners, a couple of specific questions. I hear you. Do I hear anybody disagreeing? The exception of, I believe it was Mr. Galloway, with the attachment of a condition to our action that there be a lease restriction limiting parking to one dedicated parking space per unit. If I wait long enough, you'll.
I'd be concerned about how enforceable that would be, and I don't know, and I think that would be almost, it would almost be automatic because they have a certain amount of spaces and they have a certain number of units, so you're only allowed to have you're only allowed the spaces that are available. So if someone else wants to weigh in on that.
Okay.
If I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the issue is that it's not the parking that's provided on the premises, but if you have a second car, you will park it in the neighborhood, and there is unrestricted parking on Ashland, on places where they could go and park their second car. I don't know how we address that. I don't think it actually is addressed by having a limitation to one car in this property. And I think the only choice is or if that's a concern, is to somehow change the parking restrictions in the area.
This may not be as big a problem as we all think. I happen to live on Central Street, 2 blocks from this place, in a 24-unit condominium, all are 2 bedrooms except for 4 units. Only 4 people in that building have more than one car. It's just not an issue. It will not be an issue, really.
Now, let me be sure I understand the numbers. We have 47 units and 57 54 parking places. All right. Some of which are dedicated for guests. So how many leaseholder units do we have over 47?
3. There's 50 total.
Okay.
Extra. 50 spaces and 4 guest spaces, 54 total.
Okay. And the parking study, let me look at this. Well, just to refresh our memory, the parking study found at Optima Towers, Optima Views, Optima Horizons, and the Reserve, parking demand of respectively 0.9 spaces per dwelling unit, 0.9 spaces, 1.05, and 0.91. So there's at least some evidence to suggest that you might well come in at 1 or slightly under, particularly given your proximity to other forms of transportation. Commissioner Updike, Member Updike.
If it does become a problem for the residents on Ashland, the city can restrict parking. You know, they'll address the issue if it arises.
Okay, so what I hear is no strong feeling that we ought to include that as a condition. Now, what about the question of visitor parking? Should we include something with respect to a solution to the visitor parking problem, granted that we can't specify what that solution would look like? Or is this a case where all we can do is beg?
You don't know it's going to be a problem.
Terry?
I think there's so many other kinks that the architect, developer, and the community have worked out that this is not, I don't want to throw one more thing in there. I think it'll sort itself out one way or the other. There are plenty of people who don't have enough parking on their streets right now for guests. And again, just because you're late to the party, I don't think you should have more imposed on you than other areas.
I encourage beg.
But no more than that.
Well, that we encourage attempting to work that out prior to, if it's recommended tonight, that we encourage trying to work out some additional guest parking.
And you would include that as a condition on our approval?
No, not a condition.
Well, it would.
Encouragement.
Okay. Is there a general sense up here that we encourage the developer to work out the guest parking problem with the neighbors?
But not at the cost of the fixed parking.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay.
Right.
Okay. Are there any other concerns that we need to address, or are we ready to act? I will then entertain a motion to this effect. Having found that the proposed project satisfies the standards for planned development and special use, the Commission recommends to City Council that the petition in case number 15 PLND 0015 be approved with conditions 1 through 6 as identified in the staff memo. Is there a motion?
So move.
Peters moves. Seconded.
Second. I'll second.
Sure. This we will do by roll call. Would you call the roll, Mr. Latinovich?
Commissioner Peters?
Aye.
Commissioner Scher?
Aye.
Commissioner Dubin?
Aye.
Commissioner Goddard?
Aye.
Commissioner Lewis?
Aye.
Commissioner Pigozzi?
Aye.
Chairman Ford?
Aye. The ayes are 7, the nays are none. The motion is approved. The project is recommended to City Council. Thank you all very much. I know some of you are disappointed And some of you are happy to be going on to the next step. But this has been a good session, and I thank you all. Let's just take a couple of minutes. We've got some more of our own business. Anyone in the public is welcome to stay and listen to us as we do some appointment type of business. But this portion of the proceeding is concluded. Let's not move, but let's just sit tight for a couple minutes.
No, you can park the Northwestern across the street from there after 6 o'clock. No, I don't know about overnight. That I don't. Is it overnight? It's illegal?
It's private parking, and the city has a lease. No problem. It's part of this over here? No problem. Yeah, I definitely need a signed copy.
I live in that neighborhood, and I attend some of the events there, and all the people who own, say, Northwestern says it's okay to park there after 6 o'clock. I don't know about overnight. I've never. Nobody ever gets parking tickets. We all park there. Yeah. Yeah.
They used to have an agenda.
It's there somewhere.
Agenda when I came in here.
You're too organized.
Oh, here. This is it. I got it.
Do you print it out every week, or you do? I'm too cheap to do that. I'm a paper person too, but I wish there was some way I could find pages easier.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
It may be possible, but you'd have to save the document to your own desktop and then open it up.
I'll try that.
Okay, Commissioners, let's reconvene. I think we can do this very quickly. The last remaining item on the agenda are appointments of associate members, committee members, and liaisons. We have now 3 associate members who are eligible for reappointment. Members Galloway and Updike have indicated that they would like to be reappointed as associates. I have not talked to Seth Freeman, but I'm going to assume that he would like to. Within the next 2 months, we will have 3 commissioners who are eligible for associate status. I have not talked to Commissioner Sorrow, but I will assume that he would like to be appointed as an associate. Unless he has changed his mind, Commissioner Schur has indicated that he does not wish to be appointed an associate. I'm not going to give Peters any choice. I realize that your involvement will be limited, but I need you. The rules indicate that associate members are to be elected. Therefore, I will ask for a motion to elect Galloway, Updike, Freeman, Peters, and Asaro as associate members for the next year.
Second?
Lewis, Goddard, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Committees.
Is that a change of the rules? I thought it was always the province of the chair to appoint, and I didn't know it had to come to a vote.
The word in the rules, it says elected. I would be happy to appoint, but we'll have to change the rules. Zoning Committee. At this time, the members of the Zoning Committee are Commissioner Schur, who is the chair, Peters, myself, Lewis, Dubin, and Goddard. Unless somebody wants to bail out, I would propose leaving that membership in place and designating Commissioner Lewis as the chair. Comprehensive Planning Committee, the members are currently Peters, the chair, Asaro, Schur, myself, and Dubin. Again, I would suggest leaving that membership in place, which means that a couple of months from now it will be me and Commissioner Dubin. I am not aware at this point, as I understand it at this point, there is nothing in the staff's pipeline which would likely come to the Comprehensive Planning Committee. So right now it does not have an agenda. If we reach the point where there is a project that needs to be brought to the committee, then we could add members as we wished, depending on who was interested in the particular project. Commissioner Dubin, are you willing to be named as chair of the Comp Planning Committee as long as we promise it won't meet? Absolutely. There we go. Okay.
There are some loose ends that will probably come to the committee. I will provide a letter to the commission about them.
Okay, and at that point, we'll draw in the people we need. Thank you. Okay. The Rules Committee, currently Peters, Asaro, Commissioner Lewis, and myself. Here again, assuming that we adopt the revised rules, I'd like to think at the April meeting, I think we'll need to have a meeting of the Rules Committee in October or November just to see how we're doing and if there are anything that needs to be fine-tuned. At that point, we could add anyone who wished to be involved in that scrum. So I would propose that we leave it Lewis and myself, and I will serve as chair. Liaisons, we have 4 significant committees on each of which the City Council is directly represented. The Economic Development Committee, Peters is our current representative, and I have asked Commissioner Dubin if she would succeed him in that position. The Planning and Development Committee is currently Commissioner Asaro, and Commissioner Lewis has agreed to do that, and I have promised both of them that if they have conflicts on meeting nights, I will back them up. The Housing and Community Development Committee, Commissioner Updike has been our representative, and Commissioner Goddard has offered to take his place. Transportation and Parking Committee, which is expanding its scope, as I understand it, to beyond parking to other forms of non-private automobile transportation. Commissioner Galloway has been our representative, although my record shows that we appointed Commissioner Freeman. But in any event, I think that's one on which it's important that we have a full commissioner. And so with thanks to Commissioner Galloway, I will take that position. The Public Place Names Committee, which meets, I don't know how often it meets, whenever we need to name a street after somebody. So when we get around to naming a portion of Crane after Peters, there'll be a meeting. I would suggest that we might as well leave Commissioner or Associate Member Freeman as our representative there. The ADA Advisory Board, which meets twice a year and on which Commissioner Schur has been serving, since he is not remaining as an associate, he can't continue to represent us there. And on this one, I'd like a volunteer. Twice a year, folks. It's easy.
What's the committee?
ADA Advisory. Rich, what do we have to know?
I think that we even have this because it's mandated, and there's usually 2 representatives from the city who bring us up to date on what the rules are, and if you tie them down, you can be real specific. how does it apply to us and any planned development? And they'll steer you forward. For example, on today's parking issues, the requirement is 3 dedicated parking spots, not necessarily dedicated, but 3 parking spots that can be adapted for people with disabilities. And the developer listed 3 as what he was planning on. It's from 51 to 75 parking spaces. You have to have 3, and he had them. So you can kind of keep an eye on things like that. So you pick up some good information. There isn't a lot that you have to do except show up. And they require 7 people for a quorum. And I can tell you they have a heck of a time getting that meeting together. Okay. It's not a big time commitment, but it's interesting.
Would somebody like to do this? Commissioner Goddard, thank you. Bless your heart.
I think you'll enjoy it.
One that I missed over, that I skipped over, Commissioner Pagotzi, may we add you to the Comprehensive Planning Committee? Say yes, and we'll get out of here.
Chairman Ford.
Yes, sir.
Let me make one comment. Going back almost 6 years, the first time I was on this committee, Stuart said, if you want to learn something, get on the zoning committee of the Plan Commission, because that's where it all starts. And I would encourage everybody to get on that committee.
And just to clarify, any of these committees, all members of the Plan Commission are invited, and as we have one meeting next week, I will invite everybody to join in, although only members of the committee count towards quorum.
Yeah, that's a point worth making. When the recommended revised rules come from the Rules Committee, they will include a recommendation that we no longer appoint associates to committees. And this is principally to deal with a quorum issue. You're welcome to attend, you're welcome to participate, but we will not appoint you for purposes of the membership number.
What about voting?
No.
No. Because I think that's a change then, because associates who are members of a committee could vote.
My recollection, I had thought it was they were counted for a quorum but could not vote. But in any event, assuming we accept what the Rules Committee is recommending, neither membership nor vote, but participate in the same way that you participate here.
You might have trouble getting a quorum in zoning if you've only got 4 members.
Well, I'm hoping that within a few months we will have 3 vacancies filled, and that at least some of those members will go on the zoning committee, so that we'll grow it a little bit.
On the housing community development, which I have served as an associate, I was counted for quorum purposes.
Okay.
They counted me for quorum purposes, so
yes,
there seems to be some little disparity in the rules.
Oh, I have no doubt there's all kinds of disparity in the rules.
Okay, but for zoning, associates are not considered for quorum purposes.
Correct.
Okay.
That's my understanding. All right. By now you've forgotten half of the appointments we made, but we'll remind you. May I have a motion to approve the proposed appointments?
I so move.
Dubin, seconded. Pagotzi, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. The appointments are approved. You have in your packets the 2014 annual report of the commission. We won't bother to go through it, but thank Commissioner Peters and staff for their efforts in putting it together. This being Commissioner Peters' last meeting, we'll thank him in general.
And I thank all of you.
And we are delighted. Public comment. Public, you're still here. Anything, Jessica? Bless your heart. That being said, thank you all. A reminder that the zoning committee is meeting next Wednesday at 7 here. Our next regular meeting will be April 8th at 7 here. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, what? Staff has got a couple things. Okay.
Just to remind everyone, you should have received an email from our city manager's office on training opportunities. And if you have not, let me know. I can certainly pass that on. There's going to be 2 training opportunities on April 21st or April 24th. And they've generally invited the committee members that have been appointed in the last couple of years, but I've confirmed that any member of the commission can attend those. So I would encourage you to register for one of those if you so wish. The other thing that I did have is just an update on the plan development for 1571 Maple Avenue that was presented to the Plan Commission over the last several months. It was presented ultimately to the Planning and Development Committee this past Monday, and as it was introduced at the P&D Committee, and it was recommended for, I guess, to be introduced to City Council. So it moved on out of the committee, and so it will be scheduled for the City Council, full City Council for consideration and action on the next City Council meeting. That will be the March 23rd. So I encourage you to listen in if you're not going to be able to attend.
What was the nature of the discussion of the project before it was sent to council?
There was very little discussion by the committee members. There was a lengthy presentation I shouldn't say lengthy, but about 20-minute presentation by the applicant, sort of similar things that have been presented to the Plan Commission. And then there was a similar presentation that we've seen here by the opposition. And then ultimately there were a couple of remarks by some committee members, one alderman that found that the idea to provide required parking spaces at a city public parking garage that's very underutilized is a good idea. And then another alderman that felt that not providing any parking on site was not such a good idea. So those were the only 2 comments that were received, and then the idea was to present that to the City Council where the full City Council can discuss if needed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then I believe that's all I had. As you mentioned, zoning committee meeting is next week. I encourage everybody to attend. We will have 1 item on the agenda, and the packet should be mailed out tomorrow.
Thank you. Okay. As his last official act, Peters moves we adjourn, seconded by Lewis. All in favor? Aye. Nays? Hearing none, we are adjourned.